then.
I guess you're on the clock. 10 minutes late because of me. Sorry.
It's fine. Better you than me.
Yeah. Well, let's start because I got a couple things I want to ask you about. But before I ask you about it, we need to set up who you are.
Okay.
And what you do.
Yep.
Beside where, fueling green dots. What does that mean? So just talk a little bit so everybody kind of gets an idea what your background is.
Yeah. So my name is Lundin. I am born and raised here in Negaunee. Went away to school in Minneapolis. Moved right back. So I don't count those 4 years that I was away. So I've been a Youper through and through. I am a registered dietitian and the owner of Restore Ease Dietetics. And we help folks fuel green dots, which I always think of in events being that success, whatever that looks like for somebody. Mm-hmm. But I also work with a lot of folks who aren't athletes and struggle with eating for different reasons. Mm-hmm. See a lot of folks for mental health concerns. I work with a lot of teens and young adults who've kind of gotten like off course with their nutrition and just even like being reliant on themselves and really just working on providing them with the tools to get them back to be able to eat like their peers. And I hate the word normal, but kind of just to eat normally. A lot of these kids are inundated with bad nutrition information. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's things that were modeled to them by adults in their life when they were young.
Like what? Bad eating habits, you mean?
Yeah, dieting, poor body image, maybe a lack of modeling for adventuring, physical activity, all of the stuff that we think about when we talk about being a healthy individual or a healthy human. A lot of kids, like they really soak in like those adults that are around them. And when they don't have that modeling, at least consistently, mm-hmm. it's really hard for them to understand that that's what their life could or should look like.
Go back to the mental health piece. So you're a dietitian.
Yep.
But you're working with people on mental health related items?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like what?
So mental health, because it impacts all areas of your life, it also impacts someone's relationship with food. So someone who has anxiety or depression may be on a medication that affects their appetite. Mm-hmm. It could change their body's weight, whether causing them to lose weight or gain weight. And so we help support folks when they're not really able to rely on those hunger or fullness cues. Like, what does my nutrition need to look like?
So you're saying some of the meds can create some of the health issues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so instead of
weight gain,
okay. Weight loss. And I've seen kiddos as young as 8 with losing weight or not being on their appropriate growth chart because of ADHD medication. Mm-hmm. So they're on these meds to help with other areas of their life or mental health, but then it's affecting areas of their life that should really be more intuitive.
Okay, so you're working with, it sounds like, kids and adults.
Mm-hmm. Everywhere in between.
I have to assume, maybe I shouldn't, that if you're working with an 8-year-old, the parent's involved.
Absolutely. Yep. Anytime I'm working with a kiddo who's under the age of 18, so they're a minor, I'm also working with their parents. So
do the parents come to you? Are they referred to you? Does a doctor send them to you? How's that work?
All of the above. So people can self-refer. So they reach out to me, and a lot of referrals that I get is word of mouth, which I love. Some of my favorite examples are when someone says, well, by the third person who recommended that I reach out to you, I'm finally reaching out and making this phone call or scheduling this initial appointment. So then I also have, therapists in the area, school counselors, doctors that know me from the community or from my previous roles as a dietitian in the community. And then we get referrals that way.
How common is it that medications are at play with people you talk to?
Very common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think? Do you see any commonalities, common threads? Let's just stay on the adult side for right now.
Yeah.
Like people our age or people in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Is there any common thing that that is a hurdle that they're struggling with related to nutrition?
Yeah.
And what is it?
the human experience is that everybody wants to lose weight
Okay.
as an adult. It doesn't matter what they look like, what numbers on the scale, what their body composition is. I do an intake form with every new client, and it says, what are your weight goals, whether it's to gain weight, lose weight, or maintain your weight. Almost 100% of people say that they would like to lose weight, even if they have a diagnosable eating disorder and have been told by several professionals, medical professionals, that they need to gain weight.
So has that somehow been normalized as like the benchmark for success? Losing weight?
I think so.
Perpetually dieting?
Yeah, I think so. Perpetually dieting, or just this constant, like, I don't know if it's bettering yourself or thinking that like less is more, right? The smaller I am, the more superior that I am. I mean, I see it in men and women, right? And adults of all ages, from like brand new adults and like baby adults, right? All the way through the elderly. I also think that like social media and diet culture kind of play a role in that too, of just think about what we hear about specific diets or ways of eating. It's always this, it's like weight loss is it's like kind of glorified as being like sexy, right? Like losing weight is the interesting thing. People are commonly talking about, oh, so-and-so's lost weight, or what have you done? Or I think it's so much of the human experience in our current day and age.
Well, do you have any approximate guess amongst your clientele, what percentage is female and what percentage is male?
Yeah, I do see more females than males. So I would say it'd probably be like 70% female.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe it's because I'm female. Maybe it's just a guess.
Meaning that makes it easier for other women to come to you, or guys are like, that's a chick.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a solid question, right?
It's an interesting question, huh?
Yeah.
So 70% you're approximately female. Okay. And where does let's say training come into play here?
Yeah.
Obviously there's a relationship,
Yep.
right? If you're going to have optimized health, you're going to have nutrition as a component, and then you've got baseline activity, training, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So where is that in this factor? Are you also prescribing training routines, or?
Yeah, I am not. I used to have my certification as a personal trainer, and just one of those things where you just have to focus on being the best that you can be, and wanted to focus on being that of a dietitian. I didn't want to try to be a Jill of all trades. And
did you say a Jill of all trades?
Yeah, I did.
Instead of a Jack of all trades?
I did.
Oh, I like that. I got that.
So I, working with strength coaches, working with endurance coaches, just really making sure that if an athlete is kind of floundering in the area of training, or an individual is, wanting body composition changes, that I have some solid recommendations of people that I either work with or have worked with and have had a positive experience with, and that I can give that recommendation with my full chest.
Okay. When they come to you and they're having these issues or struggles, or they just want some help, whatever it might be, is there any common thread between whether or not they are active enough, training enough? Do you know like what you're seeing?
Yeah.
Is that a deficiency? Is it not? Just out of curiosity.
The deficiency I see, and maybe it's because I'm coming at it with a dietitian lens, like that's my area of focus.
Yeah.
But regardless of the volume of training or the type of training, most folks are at risk of underfueling. And what that means is that they're not eating enough to support the load or the demand of their training. So it doesn't even really matter if they're doing like Pilates or if they're training for the Margie 100, because a lot of people are wanting to either lose weight or change their body composition. It's usually wanting more muscle mass and losing fat mass. To meet those goals, you have to be in, a deficit, a calorie deficit. And so sometimes folks will really whittle down what they're eating nutritionally and they'll try to ramp up their training or usually it's cardio, right? To try to get the results that they want. And what happens is that they usually are struggling with, it could be their performance in a workout. It could be their result at an event. There's some breakdown that happens somewhere that usually then they're kind of clued in of like, oh my gosh, I thought I knew what I was doing. I'm trying to, make all these goals happen or make all these things happen. And they're just like, lots of folks come to me and say, I just need you to tell me what to eat. And I'm like, I can do that.
Isn't that crazy though?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that coming in here today. I'm like thinking through the different things I wanted to ask you about or make sure that we talked about. And this was one of them. It's like, why is it such a mystery how and what you should eat? It's a basic premise of life. And it's clear people don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
I think why it's such a mystery is twofold. I think that there's lots of information out there and misinformation.
Yep.
And then also...
Wait, does that mean that everything I'm reading on social media isn't true?
Absolutely.
Shit.
I know. Sorry to burst your bubble. So yes, there's lots of information and misinformation. And then also that nutrition is very individualized. And it's so common to look at someone and be like, oh my gosh, you look amazing. What are you doing? And to think that their training or their nutrition, if you just like copy and paste that into your life, it's such the human experience to think like, that's going to work for me. And spoiler alert, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. But it's really having that like confidence to figure out what works for you and stick to it.
Yeah. Part of the issue I see with food and nutrition globally is it's a business.
Yes.
I think that inherently that is problem number one.
Yep.
Because it is a item that's being sold to you. Nobody really cares if it's good for you or not. 100%. They just want you to buy it.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm saying that having come from food distribution for 20 plus years. So I worked embedded within the food chain, and I got to see from the field to Cisco to the restaurant, what game is being played. And it's not a pretty game.
No. And the wellness industry, like the supplement wellness industry, it's a $71 billion a year industry.
That's wild.
They're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, they're saying, like I just said, like nutrition is individualized. And if we think about the recommendations that are out there in the wellness space, in the health space, it's all like, this is the best diet. This is going to work for you. Everyone should be on this diet.
Right. Yeah. If anybody's selling something that they say everybody should be doing, run in the other direction.
Yes.
Because that's not real.
No.
It's not real. That's just salesies, marketees.
Yep.
It's bullshit.
It is.
What would you say, because I agree, obviously people are all made different and what works for you may not work for me and what works for me might not work for Mark. However, in the same way that there's, compared to say strength training or endurance training, okay, you may react differently or your body might react differently to different types of exercises and stimuli. So some things might be more effective for you than they are for me, strength training.
Yep.
That holds true also with eating. But on both sides of this, on both nutrition, eating, and training, strength training, endurance training, there's fundamental pillars that are universal.
Yep.
So on the nutritional side, what are some universal pillars that, irregardless of your own personal chemistry and makeup, what should people be paying attention to and really caring about?
Yep. So day-to-day nutrition, we'll start there.
Okay.
Because this is a great question. I have a lot to say. I'm sure you're not surprised.
I am not. That's why you're here.
Yeah. So day-to-day nutrition, really focusing on having at least 3 meals a day. And that meal should look like a source of protein, a source of carbohydrates, and some source of color. It could be white, right? You could have a potato. And then, and have eating 3 times a day. There's so many people who don't do that. Or they're sitting down to a plate of protein. You still need fiber. You still need vitamins and minerals. You still need, like, not one nutrient or macronutrient is superior. And protein really is getting, like, the limelight right now, which is fine. Those things trend.
You mean we shouldn't all be eating elk like Joe Rogan?
I mean, you can. Elk is delicious. If you like elk, but there's lots of people who don't or don't eat meat.
Yeah, I know.
So eating, right?
Yeah.
Eating throughout the day, 3 meals, at least 3 meals a day, and then hydration. And hydration's pretty simple. If you go to the bathroom and your urine is clear, that means you are overhydrated. You need to find yourself a source of electrolytes. You need to lay off a little bit on the water.
Oh, interesting. You said overhydrated.
Overhydrated. Clear is overhydrated.
Okay. So what shade of yellow should I be aiming for?
Pale lemonade.
Pale lemonade
is the goal.
I'll never drink lemonade again.
Sorry.
Okay, pale lemonade is the optimal urine color.
Yep. And if it's any darker than that, then you are, underhydrated.
Right.
So you need to drink more water.
Have you ever heard of Bill Phillips?
I haven't.
So this is going back to the 90s, maybe touching on early 2000. Bill Phillips was, I think, the founder of EAS. It was a nutrition supplement. Abbott Labs, I think, eventually bought it or owned it. He wrote the book Body for Life.
Okay.
It was a 90-day transformation book. And what you said about the daily, taking nutrition on a daily basis, portion of protein, portion of carb, and then, some sort of color or vegetable of some sort.
Yeah.
That literally was the basis of that entire book. It was that simple.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they did weave in or fold in the products, Myoplex and creatine, HMB. But aside from that whole protocol that they had done, and this is over 30 years ago, it was not gimmicky.
Yeah.
It was literally what you just said.
Well, the secret to nutrition is that it should be easy.
So, and we do an incredible job as a species of overcomplicating that, which is actually very simple.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's time and time again.
Yep.
So,
and that's what I find. I'm trying to take someone's, like, complicated life situation. Maybe they have lots of, health concerns. Maybe they have food allergies, their demand of training, whether that's a factor or not, their goals. What I do is I take all of that, I put it into my brain and take my education and experience, and I tell people what to do, and I make it as easy as possible so that they can do it for the rest of their life. That's my goal. We're playing the long game.
Right. You are teaching, right?
Yep.
Over at NMU?
Yep. I teach for their School of Nursing.
Why do you think that this type of conversation isn't more deeply embedded into just our educational system from K through 12 in through college, continuous evolutionary education on how to, eat right, train right? Why is it not a bigger part?
I'm not sure. When I worked with the athletic department at Northern with their teams, I kind of was trying to figure out, like, where does the breakdown happen? Like, where does the overcomplication happen? And that kind of led me to reach out to some local high school athletic departments and eventually got me into middle school, working with middle school athletes. And from a modeling aspect, like going back to, like, how we learn those habits of eating and just being a human, when kids are under the age of about 10, they model after the adults in their life, their parents, guardians, what have you. And when they're in that, like, preteen, middle school age, they shift their modeling from their adults to their peers. And so sometime in those middle school years, there's this, like, transition, right? Where they're ultra curious. They're like a sponge. They're trying to pick up all the things that are going on with nutrition. And so I find that middle school age, the modeling in those elementary schools are really important, but then also the education in middle school is how we allow teens and adults to have those healthy habits with food and to keep it easy. And so that's a solid question. Like, why isn't this, I think about taking a life skills class and like, why is it not a bigger component?
Well, yeah. Why is it just a class that you take like 1 year?
Yeah.
And a struggle that I have with it too is, I don't think, I don't know why this happened or how, but I don't think that proper nutrition or paying attention to nutrition should be something that people view as being aligned with performance or people view as being aligned with athletes.
Right.
And something that you only do if you're training or you're on a team.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should be something that should be something you should have to pay for as some premium service. If you're going to send me to school and teach me a bunch of math shit that I'm never going to use, you could at least maybe immerse me in something beneficial like ongoing education on how to be a healthy human.
Yeah.
But I think part of the rub, and this is not like, I'm unpacking this thought just as we're going through this, but I think part of the rub is, again, going back to the fact that food, it's a product that's being sold.
Yep.
And you look at a bunch of, I could go to our house right now and I could pick a bunch of shit out of the cabinets that it's like, why are we eating this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's something I feel like it should be looked at. This is just something that should be basically built in to curriculum, into education.
Well, and it's actually a thought, like I literally have contact information to look into like how, again, I can't change the whole system, but I've even been looking into like, how can I get my teaching certification so that I could potentially bring a class like that into some of the schools in our community. So like you said, like it's across the board for all kids, all students, and teaching, like learning it from somebody who it's like, this is my area of expertise. I always say I'm an expert in feeding kids up to age 11 because my oldest son is 11. But I have lots of experience. I mean, my youngest eating disorder client was 12. And I've worked with folks all the way up into their 70s.
And the disorder for this 12-year-old is what? Like what is it? What's the disorder? Doesn't know what to eat, eats the wrong things.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, so going back on that like mental health piece, because I work, in sports nutrition and then also in mental health, I see a lot of athletes with eating disorders. And I would say like, aside from working with folks on like self-supported events, like the trilogy events here at 906, working with folks who have eating disorders, a diagnosable eating disorder. So they're getting diagnosed with binge eating disorder or anorexia nervosa or bulimia by a physician or a therapist. And then they're coming to me with essentially the plan to get back to a more adequate and consistent pattern of eating.
What is the definition of an eating disorder?
Yeah. So there's some diagnostic criteria. It's like the DSM-5. And there's lots of different criteria for specific disorders. And so for each of the different eating disorders, there would be different definitions. But there's also like a blanket eating disorder called like eating disorder not otherwise specified. So if, say, someone only meets like, the majority of the criteria, but not all of them for a diagnosis, and the provider feels that this individual does have an eating disorder, then they're kind of given that, diagnosis. One thing that's really hard too is that if someone has anorexia nervosa, which usually involves a severe caloric restriction to the point where most folks are classified as underweight on the body mass index scale, or that they've experienced a large amount of weight loss, they oftentimes have feelings of like body dysmorphia, which means they see their body differently than you or I would. And usually they see their body in a way that is not up to societal standards. And so a lot of the times when someone has an eating disorder, they actually have thoughts in their head that aren't their own. And we could call those eating disorder thoughts. And what happens when it becomes disordered is those thoughts then dictate food habits and often exercise habits. And so when someone is experiencing those things, if their weight is still classified as normal on the body mass index scale, a lot of the times I see this a lot in athletes who will have something called atypical anorexia. And what that just means is that they're exhibiting all these same signs, but that their weight is normal.
Are you aware of any statistical trends that would indicate whether eating disorders are on the rise or decline?
All the statistics that I've seen have, we noticed a big incline or increase in eating disorders during the pandemic. And I haven't really seen kind of what's happened since then, but my assumption or kind of professional opinion is that I don't see them trending down anytime soon.
Yeah. You were at the Leadership Summit when James was talking about, we're going to have James on actually next week.
Yeah.
Because we're going to kind of dive into that presentation he did on kids.
Yeah.
And sort of the state of health, physically and mentally for children.
Yeah.
But do you remember, because he talked about how statistically obesity is rising amongst children. Do you remember what the rate was?
I don't. But
I remember it was not good.
It was concerning.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it was staggering.
Yeah.
The rate at which kids are obese. 60% somehow lands in my brain, but we'll make sure to unpack that when we get James on.
Yeah.
How many kids do you get referred? Is there quite a few? I mean, are parents come to you, they're coming to you regularly?
Yeah, they kind of come in waves. I had a big influx after spring break of like middle school and high school kids.
After spring break?
Yeah.
This year?
Yeah, just kind of, I think it was just...
Why?
I think I was because I was out of town. Anytime I go on vacation, I get this big influx of clients. Oh. Which is a good, sometimes as when you're a solopreneur and a business owner, I've heard of colleagues who feel like they can't ever take a day off or they can't ever take time away with their family. And for me, I'm like having a flexible schedule and kind of calling the shots on my own life is a big reason why I started my own practice. Mm-hmm. And also, ultimately to help people in a way that I find is actually helpful in that very individualized approach to nutrition and health in general. So yeah, I find whenever I take the day to go for a long ride or I go on vacation, it's like I'm getting notifications the whole time about new client request appointments. So I think it's kind of like karma reminding me that I need to take time for myself too.
Mm-hmm. Well, talk about that a little bit. You're running your own business. So I have to believe that if you're not working a classic 9 to 5.
No, I'm not.
You're not working a job where you're working a swing shift or you get weekends off, or it's a very atypical experience.
Yeah.
Professionally. So I would think that it's probably kind of hard to parse out your two lives are intertwined.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair way to describe it?
Absolutely.
And I would think also that sometimes you're with your family, you're doing family things, but there's also this infusion of the business probably comes in, whether it's just a text with a question from a client or a phone call or an email, right?
Yeah.
Sort of this intertwined yin and yang that just kind of takes place 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Accurate?
Absolutely. And it could be just running into somebody on the trail that knows you. And because I'm a health professional as a dietitian, the HIPPA, which is the Health Information Privacy and Protection Act, which means I can't talk about a client or really even acknowledge them if I see them out in the wild unless they acknowledge me first. Right. And I hold that to that's what has to be done.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it can be hard because especially in the mental health space, a lot of the times those aren't talked about. And it's not that someone could have a really great experience with you as their dietitian and you could have really helped them, but there's no, like, I would never force someone to write a review or a testimonial or anything like that. Like, that has to come organically.
Yeah.
And that's why word of mouth is so important. But it's absolutely, you might see somebody on the trail who is, asking about, something, a race that's coming up or something like that. But it also, I try to take time for myself. I try to, take time away, but like last night, we had my parents over for dinner to celebrate my dad's birthday. And I still had, my appointments were done for the day. And when everything got cleaned up and the kids, were all tucked in and sleeping, I was in bed charting and like wrapping up my day. And so I find that even though it sometimes feels like you're always on the clock or that opportunity is always there, which can be a blessing and a curse. It allows that flexibility for me to, train, to spend time with my family and my kids, and also do something that I really love and feel like I'm filling a really great need in our community.
Yeah. Well, just listening to you, because I'm living a similar life, right?
Yeah.
I'm never not on the clock.
Right.
And that does not bother me at all.
Yep.
And it's been like this even pre-906 when I was in sales. I was always on the clock. Like, if you're going to be good at selling anything or just good at managing relationships and getting people what they need, you need to be available when they fucking need it.
Yep. Yep.
Like, I'd have a salesman who would try to disappear for the weekend or on Saturdays, and he would only show up on Sunday to do his Sunday calls for Monday. And it's like, if you want to succeed, and your phone calls on Saturday, or your phone rings on Saturday, and you don't answer that call, either A, you missed the chance to get a new account, or B, you just lost an account.
Yeah.
Because when you didn't pick up, when your customer needed you, your competitor did.
Yep.
And that, to me, is an area that a lot of people, I think that we've been tricked into thinking that our work life and our personal life have to live in separate universes.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people have been programmed to act that way. And that's exactly why they get nowhere.
Yeah.
Opportunity doesn't work on a Monday through Friday schedule.
Right.
Opportunity doesn't take Saturday and Sunday off.
Yep.
You're either there when it's there or you're not.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And that working, right, that work life and family life or other life is that intertwined has kind of come out in the best way this year. I had the opportunity to bring my oldest son down to East Lansing for the Quiet Adventure Symposium.
Yep.
And he was living his best life,
Yep.
right? Like and it's also a great opportunity for him to see, he can't sit in my office when there's clients and he can't do some of the things that are a big part of my job.
Yeah.
But when I have the opportunity to bring him along and he gets to see like what mom does and what I've built.
Yep.
That's it for me. It's not always easy traveling with a kid, but I just really think of it in that like glass half full of like, this makes all of those late night calls or a Saturday call worth it.
Well, think about what you are showing him, what he's seeing.
Yeah.
Right. So I remember him being down there at the symposium and, saw him with you, and he floated by the adventure team booth a couple times, checked in, said hi, which was cool. That's a positive thing. Like you're modeling for him a possible future.
Yeah.
And I've said this before to parents, and I know it's tough to hear this, but you need to hear it, and you should really take it to heart and think about it. Are you living the life that you want for your kids?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, the answer is no.
Yeah.
I mean, I was there one time. I was in corporate, right? They paid me just enough money to make it really comfortable.
Yeah.
And I had to choose to walk away from it. And then life got really fucking hard.
Yeah.
Because you make a lot less money.
Yeah.
And everybody looks at you like, what the fuck are you doing? Like because you've got a comfortable situation, you're making the money, you've put in all this time, 20 plus years. And they're like, why would you do this? At the point that you get to where you can kind of go on autopilot.
Yeah.
Why would you throw it away? But frankly, it was because I don't want I took accountability, and like, if my kids or our kids see us settling and accepting being miserable, they will,
Yeah.
you know? And I think them, because our kids have been the same thing, like they're ingrained in this whole personal life, work life, just smashed together, impossible to parse out.
Yeah.
And there's much more upside in it than there is downside.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I would say the only time that I can't take a call is, every once in a while I'll get a client call and I'm like driving home somewhere and my phone's connected to Bluetooth and I can't answer the call without like it picking up. Right. And in that moment, it's a text that say, hey, I'm not in a private place to take your call. Is everything okay? Right. But you're not saying like, I'll ignore it and I'll just leave it on, I'll touch back on Monday. Right. Like that doesn't work.
Yes. I have learned to be very careful about who I answer the phone for when I pick up when I'm with my kids, because our community that you know very well, as soon as the line goes live, they say some wild shit.
Yeah. I believe it.
It's hilarious.
Arthur actually still remembers something that you said when we were packing up from Margie Camp. He didn't quote you exactly, but it's amazing what they remember. So.
Oh yeah. I've told this story before where we were living in the township in a rental house up not too far from TV6.
Okay.
We're living up there. Cable's like, I don't even know if he's probably 1, maybe 2. He's old enough to hear a word and to be able to repeat it.
He's in the parroting.
He's in the parroting phase. So we're rolling up to home, and as I look across the highway, because I'm going to do a Michigan, turnaround to go back to the house, I look at the lawn. Gavin was supposed to mow the lawn. And of course, Gavin was young too at this point, and he did a shitty job. So as I look at the lawn and I'm swinging around to go to the driveway, I look at the lawn. I'm like, what the fuck? And what do you think I heard from the back seat? The little parroted, what the fuck? And then I'm like, oh no, don't say that.
And then they keep saying it.
Right. And then they keep saying it. Leading by example. Not always in the best ways.
Yeah. Not always.
So with this, I'm curious for your kids, because of this really laser focused emphasis on nutrition and, proper eating. How do they gravitate toward that? Like, are they constantly angling for the bad stuff?
No.
Do they like the good stuff?
We don't use either of those words in our house to describe food.
Good.
It's just all food, right?
Okay.
Family dinners are really important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And kids, we don't make adult food and kids food. Like we make food. Mm-hmm. We had salmon and like garlic short ribs and asparagus and potatoes last night for dinner. And my kid, like my youngest, is so excited about asparagus. Like he'd finish off all of it. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about like, he's not rewarded for finishing his asparagus. It's like, well, if you like it, then you eat it. But your kids have to see you eating those foods. And that's the most important thing. I feel like a lot of times parents might gravitate towards making things that are more convenient for them as a parent instead of making a family meal that everyone's sitting down and eating together. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, it stinks to put time and energy into planning or preparing a meal and having your kid being like, I'm not eating that. And full disclosure, my husband does all of the cooking in our household. So it's usually not even me that's the one that's like preparing the food, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but modeling that, right? Modeling what it looks like, having that time around a family meal. And, all foods are an option. We often have ice cream in the freezer and candy in the pantry, and it's a non-issue. We talk about, my kids will ask for treats, and either yes, a treat is being offered, or no, a treat isn't being offered. It's not a end point to whether you ate all your asparagus or finished all your food. And I know I was kind of grown up on the like clean plate club, meaning that you like eat everything on your plate, and then a treat was kind of like put on this pedestal.
Oh, it's very 80s-ish.
Yeah. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't give kids the opportunity to kind of navigate their food preferences. One of kind of like the pioneers in feeding kids, her name is Ellen Satter, and I really like her work. She talks about the division of responsibility. And that means you as the adult is responsible for deciding like what's being served and when it's being served. And it's the kid's responsibility to decide what they're going to eat and how much. And when you can kind of separate that responsibility, it really takes a lot of the like power struggle out of the situation. So that means if like, I really like having dessert at lunch. I call it lunch dessert. And so if dessert's being offered, like put it on the plate with the rest of the food. And if they eat it first, so what? If they eat it first, it's gone, right? But that's just a completely different way that food was modeled to even me as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And even for like my parents and my grandparents and things like that.
Well, probably still.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yep.
What did they have for breakfast this morning?
That's a good question. My older two, I was actually writing this. I told you I was going to start writing one. So I was writing in my office. So I don't know what the older two had, but my youngest wanted the very last toaster strudel. And then we helped cut up. He didn't want like anything else, but I said, well, there's a mango that's ripe. So we cut up a mango together. He's very into helping cut it into teeny tiny pieces.
Yep.
Which is nerve-wracking because fruit is slippery and 5-year-olds are super, versed in sharp objects. And then, kiwi. So I had to jet before he was finished. So I could get home and that plate might be empty, and I could get home and that plate might be mostly full.
So mango and kiwi.
Yep.
What'd you have for breakfast?
I had oatmeal with blueberries and peanut butter and pepitas.
Oh, very nice. Very, very sophisticated.
Yeah, I texted my husband as I was laying in bed and said, will you make me oatmeal? Because he makes oatmeal almost every morning.
Oh, does he?
And then, so it was waiting for me when I came down.
So one of the things about eating healthy, in air quotes, or eating right, however you want to frame it or label it, there seems to be extra cost associated with eating better. Like there seems to be like this whole industry around, healthy food.
Yeah.
What would your suggestion be? Because I think sometimes the argument in this arena also comes down to, do you have the financial means to eat the food?
Yeah.
That is truly good for you or healthy for you or healthy for your family. Like what would your advice be to families who maybe, and I think a lot of people fall into this, they're feeling that financial pressure of the cost of goods.
Yeah.
How do they approach nutrition for their family in a positive way?
Absolutely. Speaking about that, the financial pressure, I have 3 elementary school age boys, and they're only getting bigger and only are going to get bigger and hungrier, right?
Yep.
It goes back to healthy nutrition kind of getting overcomplicated in our society. A lot of the recommendations that even I'm guilty of giving patients when I worked in the hospital, like as a brand new dietitian, about, we tell folks to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. And the things that are typically in the perimeter are, like the whole foods, the fresh foods, meats, dairy, eggs, all that jazz. And I think, but those are also the most expensive. And so sometimes it can really, those recommendations, while it's what we know from a nutritionally sound standpoint, it doesn't apply to every budget and every household. And I think that's where the breakdown happens, because they say, oh yeah, well, I know that I should shop the perimeter of the grocery store, but what if I can't, what if I can only afford 3 items from the inside? So it goes back to like eating enough should always be like, regardless of what's good or bad, healthy or not, eating enough should always be everyone's individual top priority, whether you're an 8-year-old kid or a 70-year-old adult. And so if that means buying fruits or vegetables that are canned or frozen, that's great. And that's why I said like a source of color could be applesauce. A source of color could be, a fresh mango that your 5-year-old cut up. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't have to micromanage how healthy something is. Like, let's just bring it back down to the basics of, do I have a source of color on my plate? And same thing with protein, right? It doesn't have to be this bougie protein drink or protein powder. I prefer it not to be. I'd rather you, count like canned beans or like dried beans that you rehydrated as your protein source than get like 4 times the amount of protein from some bougie protein powder.
Yeah. So protein can be particularly expensive.
Right.
Right. So what would your suggestion be with some cost-effective protein options and sources for people?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really helpful to kind of batch cook protein. So obviously, like, you can get bigger packages of, whether you're buying chicken or whether you're buying beef or whatever protein source you're buying. If you're buying a bigger package and then cooking it and then using that throughout the week in different recipes, it's going to cut down on waste, right? It's like something's not going to go bad. And then you're also kind of saving more at the grocery store when you're checking out. It can be really helpful to shop, like, look at what's on sale and things like that, as opposed to just declaring, this is what I'm making for dinner. And then that particular cut of meat either isn't available or it's, 10 times the price that you kind of expected.
Right. You mentioned beans. What about eggs?
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Solid? We do a lot of eggs, a lot of hard-boiled eggs.
Yeah.
A lot of cooked eggs, definitely. A lot of steak. How about carbs? The carbohydrate side to me is always a little nuanced.
Yeah. What do you want to know about carbs?
Just, I mean, if you were to recommend good solid carb sources for people, what would you recommend as a dietitian?
Yeah, it depends on the goal, right? Individualized. I hate to sound like a broken record.
Yeah, no.
But for some people who are really trying to, say, gain weight, when we recommend, like, make half your grains whole, or really make sure you're eating whole grain carbs, that extra fiber can sometimes, it creates more space in your stomach and makes you fuller sooner.
Yep.
So it depends on the goal, right? Like, if someone's trying to lose weight, why we often hear that, making half your grains whole is because that fiber can really help provide satiety, or meaning keeping you fuller longer. But if you have a kiddo who has ADHD and their medication causes their appetite to be less, that fiber can really prevent us from keeping them at a weight that's developmentally appropriate for them.
How often do you get somebody that's trying to gain weight?
I have a couple. I would say probably like less than 2% of my client.
And
Regardless, like, aside from the eating disorder clients, I do want to say that because most of the folks that I see for eating disorders for medical necessity need to gain weight.
The couple of people that are looking to gain weight, are they male or female?
Right now they are male.
Okay. I was guessing male.
Yeah.
Any idea what their goals are? Besides gaining weight?
Yeah. Usually it has been usually related to athletic performance. So they're
in what arena?
Football.
Okay. So competitive.
Yep.
That's interesting.
But again, it's because like most male cyclists don't come to me and say, Dawn, I want to gain weight. Like, that's usually not.
No, that's a polar opposite goal, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, they're all trying to lose. Well, I don't know if all the guys in the cycling community are trying to lose weight. They'd rather just go buy a $12,000 carbon bike and save 4 ounces.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they could just actually maybe cut 5 or 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
save $12,000.
Yeah. And I think the hard thing is, like, we've talked a lot about like regular everyday folk nutrition, right? But it can be hard when folks come to me with a specific goal for their nutrition or their body composition, weight gain, weight loss, weight maintenance. And going back to the piece about training is that I'm not prescribing training, but I am asking folks about their training. I'm factoring that into their nutritional needs. And I'm also factoring that into, does their nutrition related goals match up with their training goals or their training cycle?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like, like even right now, so Margie's in September. If someone came to me right now and said they wanted to lose weight and wanted it to be like a performance, they were concerned about their performance at Margie.
Yep.
We're really riding a fine line right now of like, if that's going to be a beneficial investment for their focus on nutrition. Margie Camp is usually for me is kind of like, you gotta be happy with where you're at right now.
Yeah.
And let's focus on your nutrition plan for the event.
Right.
And you can worry about, or we can focus on weight composition or body composition changes after the race.
The whole losing weight and gaining weight thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that I've never personally thought about it, but it's never factored into the goal.
Yeah.
I don't understand, because it does seem like a lot of people are very sensitive to the weight should somehow be tethered to whatever the goal is.
Yeah.
And the example I'll use is when I was primarily training on the bike, my body weight hung sort of in the 200 to 208 area.
Okay.
All the training, my eating was pretty much the same then as it is now. That hasn't changed much. The activity, the mode of training has. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty constant. I look back because I do track my weight in MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
Because I just like to track it over time. I think I have like 9 years of history.
Yeah.
So very consistent, 200, 208. But my weight was never a goal.
Yeah.
The training was the goal.
Yep.
And the weight was a result of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it was just like pretty consistently in that same area. Now I've flipped the other way, and I'm really not on the bike at all right now.
Yeah.
Cardio has been downplayed. I'm in the gym, and I weigh 236.
Okay.
But that's not a goal.
Right.
I didn't come into this striving to be heavier or to gain weight. I did strive to come into it to get stronger.
Yep.
And then as a result of doing specific things to attain the goal, yes, now I weigh more.
Yep.
It just seems like I think that you got to somehow detach from that body weight
100%
piece.
And it's different for every body and different stage of life. I've been about the same size my whole adult life. And after I had my third kid, I remember going to the doctor's office and hopping on the scale like I normally do. And the number was different than what I expected. And to be fully transparent, it ruined my day. It ruined my day. And that's not something that I would ever experience. Not someone who struggles with like confidence or.
Why did it ruin your day? Just wasn't what you expected?
Yeah, it was more. It was more than what I expected it to be. And it really shouldn't have mattered, right? Like if I think about it in hindsight, it really shouldn't have mattered. But I couldn't shake the fact that it did. It did matter. And so I remember going home and thinking like, okay, well, I have the tools to change something, but what would that require? What would that mean? What would I have to manipulate in my day-to-day life? It was during the pandemic. I had 3 kids at home. Like we could go back and nickel and dime the whole situation.
Yeah.
And what I decided was it all came down to me saying, I can do anything I want with my kids. At that time, I could go out and ride my bike as many miles as I want, many hours, whatever. I can push my kid in a jogging stroller. I can pull my kid skiing. I can do all of these things. So why is the weight something that is making me feel less than? Right? So I stopped weighing myself. Like it wasn't something I did regularly. When I go to the doctor's office, like I'm done having babies. I don't have any health concerns where they need to monitor my weight. So if there's a concern, like if I go in for the doctor's office, I ask them not to weigh me. And sometimes I get like a little bit of pushback. Now they know. They're just like, all right, like at my annual physical, I'll hop on the scale backwards. And just because like I don't need, for some reason, I just like, it had never been an issue for me to know. And then it was. And so I really wanted to be mindful of that. And I think what happens is when, like you talked about, like the detaching, right? for some people, you can really be intentional and detach that and know that number. And there's some people, for some reason, like it was just really hard for me, you know? And so, yeah, I think more now about like knowing that number caused me to have more days where I felt bad about myself. And that was a new experience for me. So I decided that something had to change.
And that was because of the number on the scale.
Yeah. I felt like I was.
Were you working out at this time?
Yeah.
Training?
Oh, yeah.
Strength training?
All the time.
So, I mean, obviously you're familiar with the BMI chart.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that thing could not be more flawed for somebody.
It's trash.
Yeah, for somebody who's athletic and engaging in strength training, you're going to weigh more than an average person your size and age.
Yep.
The scale is irrelevant.
Yep.
And that might be even why, for me, like, I only look at weight as a data point.
Yep.
It is an input of information on a particular day.
Yep.
Now, you can look at that across time. Mm-hmm. You know, like a reference, I have 8 years of history. It's actually probably more than that. Now, if you look across data across time, that does start to tell a story. But when I see these ebbs and flows in my personal chart, I can pretty much be like, well, here's what was going on. Here's why.
Yeah.
But if I was attached to wanting to be 210, and that was just like the number,
Yeah.
and my training significantly changes. There's a 180 from heavy endurance on the bike to heavy in the gym, strength training. What you're doing and your goal are in opposition.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, is that maybe where some people have a critical flaw in the program?
Yes. And I think you have to be mindful of how you react to that number. Like you said, you can come to it from a very neutral spot, right? And say like, it's a data point. It doesn't make me worthy or unworthy. It doesn't make me, that I'm making progress in the gym or I'm not, right? There's this like, I hear it a lot. And honestly, I had this, I think when I saw that bigger number, I thought I was fat. Like I had that thought of like, wow, like I'm, you hear this song and dance about, women having babies and bouncing back. And even though athletically I could throw down whatever workout I needed to do, I got hung up. And so I really had to be honest about like, okay, what do I need to change? What do I need to do? Because my body's not the problem, right? So let's be really honest about like, is this information actually helping me? Right? Like if you're able to look at it from a really neutral spot like you are. And I've gotten to the point where I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And that's great because I actually had we were getting ready for a trip to Florida and I had some running shorts that I got postpartum with my third. He's 5 now. And at some point with lifting and everything, they got a little tight. And so I've been meaning to like sell them or get rid of them. And I was trying on shorts for my trip and I just grabbed all my shorts and I tried them on. And I was like, oh, these actually fit in a way that like I'm going to pack them with. And the beautiful thing is that I was able to come at it from such a neutral place because I didn't have that number associated with it. And I remember telling a friend, I said, it felt really good for me to know that had they not fit me, it wouldn't have changed. I wouldn't have skipped a beat. I would have just been like, okay, shorts don't fit. I have some that do. Right. But there's so much that ties into like the number. And I think, data, whether it's, you can look at all the different data that we can see as a human or even as an athlete, if we take it a step further. And you really have to be honest with yourself. Like, is this extra information distracting me from the important thing? And for me, it's like, I do all of these things and have these goals so I can spend time with my kids.
Yeah.
And so that when they have kids, I can spend time with my grandkids.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter. Like, they don't care how much I weigh.
Right.
So why do I?
Right. Hopefully the grandkids aren't around for a while.
I hope so.
What's the tie between what you eat, what you put in your body, and mental health?
It's huge. And all of it comes down to like eating enough, that same like pillar, right? Of like eating enough, no matter what your focus is, that is so, under nutrition or just eating restriction can increase anxiety, depression, just even energy levels, to go to work, to go to school, to pay attention, to engage with other people and have real face-to-face conversations. And even if someone doesn't have, a mental health diagnosis, everyone should be considering their mental health, their stress management. If you're walking around hungry all the time, you're really not showing up as your best self. And if you think you are, you're lying to yourself.
If you unpack that for me.
Yeah.
If you're walking around hungry all the time.
A lot of the times when people aren't eating enough, they are, they're just not kind of functioning at full capacity.
Okay.
A lot of people will describe food noise, meaning that they're constantly thinking about food. So like if I didn't eat breakfast this morning and all I'm doing in my head is thinking about like food and what I should be eating, or if I'm hungry, it'd be really hard for me to sit here and have this conversation with you.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
There was a question I had. Okay. So your recommendation as a dietitian, and again, I know this may be different by person and what they're doing, but are there any, in your mind, daily recommendations on protein intake, carb intake? If you want, go at it just like normal everyday person, and then talk about it from an athletic perspective training.
Yeah.
Like what are the recommendations? Because I hear a lot of different information on this.
Yep.
How much protein you should be taking in, what you should be doing with carbs, that whole thing. What's your take on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at just everyday humans, everyday nutrition, a lot of the times about half of your calories from carbohydrates is a really simple example, good solid recommendation. And that doesn't mean that every person walking around knows exactly how many calories that they need. We could bring it back to that kind of serving of carbs, protein, and color. And you could say, make half of your plate or bowl or whatever you're eating, make half of it carbs.
Okay.
And then I think having a really solid, the science part of it is for health, we need 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. So that does require some math, right?
What is that per pound?
It would be like there's 2.2 kilograms in a pound. So it'd be roughly like half of your body weight, a little less than half.
Okay.
And what we're hearing a lot in social media is that you should eat a gram per pound.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, which is really setting folks up for this like really high goal in my experience. And then what happens is when we have a really high goal, whether it's in protein or fat or carbohydrates, it doesn't allow us to get enough of the other things.
That 1 gram per pound of body weight, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, is that being promoted socially by the performance realm? Is that where it's coming from?
I think it's coming from the supplement industry.
Okay, from the supplement industry.
Because it's really hard to meet that.
Right.
Unless you like own a small, like you own like a beef farm or like a chickens and,
so you supplement with some sort of whey protein or something like that along that line?
Yeah. Or protein. I mean, they're putting protein in popcorn and, ice cream. They're putting protein in everything these days.
Yeah.
People are making pizza crust out of cottage cheese and all the things. And it's just like make it stop.
What's the downside of too much protein? Is there such a thing as too much protein?
There is. And it really depends on your like individual health history. But as we age, right? Like we think there's lots of folks that I work with who are in their 60s and their 70s, like training for these events like Margie, which I just think is so rad. And as we age, our body just becomes a little more inefficient at filtering out those byproducts of digestion and absorption. And protein is a big one because it's the only macronutrient that has nitrogen in it. And our body has to filter that out. And our kidneys do that through our urine, which is pretty rad. But as they become less efficient, or if someone has chronic kidney disease or has some type of a kidney injury, their bodies aren't able to filter that out as well. And it can be detrimental to someone's health. But like I said, the biggest issue I see is not from a medical standpoint like that, like irrelevant of health history, like kidney disease. It's more that if someone's overemphasizing protein, they may not be getting enough fat, which is required because there's 4 fat-soluble vitamins that need enough fat to be digested and absorbed.
What are they?
Vitamins A, D, E, and K. And then the other standpoint, which I see a lot, is when protein intake is really high, usually that means carbohydrate intake is really low. Mm-hmm. And that's your body's preferred source of fuel.
Right.
And it's your quickest digesting. It's what preferably you need when you're on the trail, when you're doing an event, when you're adventuring. Mm-hmm. And it's also, carbs are also the one that is less likely to cause any GI distress. So what I see is when people are really emphasizing protein and they're eating hard-boiled eggs and meat sticks on the bike or on the run, we usually blame carbs or just food in general. But it's like, well, your body's got a hard-boiled egg in your stomach and it's taken a lot longer to digest. Whereas if you had carbs, they start digesting as soon as they hit your mouth. You have enzymes in your saliva that start breaking things down.
So you said 3 meals a day.
Yep.
How would a person's fueling change between different modes of training? Mm-hmm. So let's say you're doing your 3 basic meals a day and you're hitting those portions that you're recommending.
Yep.
What does it look like? Maybe it's the same, mm-hmm. but does it look different if you're primarily endurance training, running, biking, swimming, whatever?
Yep.
Versus strength training?
Yeah.
How did those look different nutritionally?
Your portions of, so 2 things, portions and timing are the 2 things that if someone's more strength based.
Okay.
We focus a little more on in endurance. Usually folks are biking or running longer. They're adventuring longer on the trail. So we're going to do more with like carbohydrates during their long efforts. And not that these things aren't important, like if someone's strength focused, but we can't be perfect at all the things at all the time. So we really have to choose like what's our priority. So priority might be carbs during these long efforts in an endurance focus. And for strength focus, we do actually recommend a higher protein recommendation. So for strength, we bump that up to 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. So grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And what that can look like on a plate is that maybe you're overlapping your carbs and color. So choosing like corn or sweet potatoes. So choosing a starchy form of carbohydrate, and you're giving yourself a larger portion of protein. It doesn't mean that half your plate's protein, but right. Maybe like a third of your plate is protein. So just emphasizing it a little more at each meal. Mm-hmm. And then when someone is really focusing on strength gain, that post-training refueling window that's the bread and butter of it. And that's a source of protein and carbs within 30 minutes of finishing a hard effort. And then a meal within 90 minutes of leaving the gym.
Within 90.
90. So I call it the 30-90 rule. Snack within 30, mm-hmm. meal within 90.
And what if you're not doing that? What are you giving up?
You're giving up some recovery. So you're giving up kind of, feeling your best when you're in the weight room the next day. And that really depends on like, what are you doing the next day, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're also giving up some strength gains. Like, let's be honest, if you're not being mindful about your nutrition, it's like you have to put as much focus into your post-fueling windows or those post-training windows as you do to the time you spend, working your sets in the gym.
Where are you at? Where do you land on creatine? Do you use it?
I bought some and it ended up being a fake product. So I had to return it. Yeah.
What do you mean fake?
So I bought a well-recommended creatine and I was just like, I'll just add it to my Walmart order. Well, turns out it was from like some third-party seller. So when I got it, it was in a different, like it looked legit. And then when I opened it up, it was a different shape. So it was supposed to be like a hexagon shape, and it was actually like a square.
The container?
They were gummies. I took Sean's recommendation and I got some creatine gummies. So
gummies.
So I need to, because I don't recommend anything that I don't use myself or wouldn't give to my kids.
Yeah.
That's something that like tried and true. It's actually one of the favorite parts of my job is like trying new nutrition products. And, because I mean, how else are you going to give recommendations to other people? And some people have different food preferences, but I'm not going to tell someone like, hey, you really should take creatine if I'm not willing to take it myself.
Right. So are you taking it now? Did you get rid of imposter creatine?
I got rid of the imposter creatine, and I need to order like just the legit stuff from the website.
So you haven't used it yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I have lots of clients that do.
Yeah. So clients, what is their mode of training? Is it both endurance side and strength training?
Yep.
So it's kind of universally being used?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And why are they using it?
Usually for the strength benefits, right? The body looking to have more lean body mass. I've been seeing a little bit of an influx in females who are in perimenopause or in menopause. And there's lots of body composition changes that happen during that time.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times it's hard because it's a physiological change that happens. And so we're kind of trying to work against the natural progression of things. And so we do at times have to really make sure that we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's.
I'm a fan of creatine, just universally.
Yeah.
From any information I've read, I have yet to find a downside to it.
Yep.
I have yet to find anything that says it's harmful in any way.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the very few things that I can think of that seems to just be universally positive.
Yep.
And regardless of who you are and what you're doing.
I think the only downfall that people will talk about, and it's mainly females, and I'll call call
I think I know where you're going with this.
is weight gain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's beauty for me because I'm like, well, I don't know how much I weigh anyways, so I'm just going to take it.
Okay, so on the weight gain side, are you saying, is it weight gain through increase in, let's say, legitimate lean body mass? Or is it water retention, or is it both?
I'm not actually sure because a lot of the times people are reporting weight gain, but there's so many factors that influence someone's body weight, right?
Yeah.
So it's so easy for us as humans to start taking something, anything, doing anything, and then have something happen in our life. And we want a reason, right? So it's like, is your weight fluctuating because you are eating more? Or like you said, because you're pushing yourself harder in the gym and you have, you're gaining lean body mass. I feel like a lot of those side effects are kind of like these cultural concerns or, and again, whenever I'm recommending creatine to a male client, they're never asking me about weight gain. Yeah. They're never like, oh, but what about this? Right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I do think it is like a concern from just like, genders across, females are usually more concerned about something causing weight gain, but it's multifactorial.
Yeah. So Gavin, my oldest, started taking creatine, and I actually told him up front, I said, just be prepared that as you load and start to take this regularly, assuming that he does remember to take it regularly, you're going to add 3 to 5 pounds of weight, and it's going to be a lot of water retention. And that has historically been my experience, is that you do end up, for whatever reason, I do think that there's some information that you can actually get off the web on this, that your body's holding in more water, more water uptake into the cells. But then on top of that, if you're taking it and you're pairing it with proper nutrition and a well-executed training platform, particularly strength, you are going to gain some lean muscle mass.
Yeah.
Creatine's great in helping with recovery and strength gain. And
if we think about like someone who is interested in taking creatine, like just say that most most people are looking at it from a strength benefit. If they are emphasizing on strength more, they're usually reducing the amount of cardio that they're doing, right? And so the caloric demand that the body is exerting for those two activities are different. They both have metabolic and physiological benefits.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so if we think about it, even just from like, we can sit back and both say, oh, that makes sense. But it's hard then when people they want to make changes, but they are so attached to that number and they're so attached to that, like an unrealistic idea that number's never going to change. Right. And they're kind of letting that prevent them from, whether it's, eating more carbs or fueling well on the bike, or whether it's taking creatine, right? That there's so much about you as a human and even as an active, adventuring person than a number on the scale.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get too emotionally connected to all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the first step to really getting a good, clear, objective view of where you are and then maybe where you want to go is stop being so fucking tied up emotionally to everything.
Yeah.
And the numbers, you just have to realize, especially like for us, I'm 51 now. The landscape's different as I'm aging than it was when I was 25.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get too attached to different numbers and different visions or views that we have of ourselves. And those don't get updated.
Yep, they don't. Absolutely.
And you need to be real with yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing, once you're willing to get real and get a real lay of the land, then you got to be willing to put in the time and the work. For whatever it is you want, whether it's to lose weight or gain weight. Again, that shouldn't be the goal.
Yeah.
You should just identify, I need to do this, this, and this. And doing these consistently will probably get me here.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like the weight number is the destination, it's more the result.
Yeah.
Or it's not the goal, it's a result.
I think it's really easy to nickel and dime those numbers when when you're not all in on nutrition or training.
Yeah.
And the example I'll give is like,
that makes sense.
Today is 207 of working with Rob Lee for the Margie Duathlon, the rest day. So I woke up and did some writing.
You're podcasting on a rest day?
On a rest day. Yeah.
Did Rob have you put on your heart rate strap so we can look at what your heart rate does during this podcast?
No, I could look right now, but wrist-based heart rate isn't as accurate as my other one.
He's going to ask you for your RPE. What did it feel like, Don? Was it a 7?
I'm not actually sure. But I remember thinking one day, I was like, wow, it really is nice to not think about, get that like tied up in like, whether it's body image or whether it's how you see yourself as like a runner or a biker, or, you could get into like all of that, how you see yourself, right? Your perception of yourself. I think a lot of us do think about size and shape and those data points, right? Like life just feels like this leaderboard, right? It doesn't have to be like that. But I have found that when you are all in and you are putting in as much work, like honestly putting in as much work as you possibly can every single day, it's really hard to feel bad about yourself. At least that's been my personal experience.
We get very well-defined images of who we are or what we are. And then we do a fantastic job of reaffirming that on a daily basis, oftentimes to a detriment.
Yeah.
I think that I agree with what you just said. And I think that a lot of people are held back by themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reference somebody because it's the first thing that comes top of mind. You're probably going to know who I'm talking about. But there's a person we both know. And she had this image of her as a person who doesn't run because she has asthma. And literally, I had messages from her telling me, like, this is why I've never run. This is why I don't run. These are all my issues. And I just remember thinking, like, you got to stop saying that.
Yeah.
Okay? Stop saying that. Stop saying that you are a person who can't run. Stop saying that you are a person who is held back by asthma. One of my questions to this person was, when's the last time you were checked? When was the last time you had it verified if you have asthma? And it's just been interesting now to watch her progression, because I think what she's now discovering as she's expanding her training horizon, it's that it wasn't the asthma that was holding her back. It was her image of herself as someone who was being held back by it. And you could play that out across, I'm going to throw Salma under the bus here. He could lift 400 pounds on a deadlift if he dedicated himself to doing it, but he has a negative perception of what a person who deadlifts 400 pounds is. He thinks they're meatheads, which he thinks he is not. The only thing between him and being able to deadlift 400 pounds is being committed to doing it.
Yeah.
But there's an image that he has of himself and of a person who does that don't jive.
Right.
400 pounds.
That's partially true.
Partially true.
Yeah, we all just need to get out of our own way.
Out of our own head.
Yeah, out of your own head, out of your own way. And, it's hard. It's hard committing yourself to a goal and putting in the work, but it's also worth it. And I think, being committed to something and seeing it through on the days where you don't get enough sleep, or you don't feel like the workout's going to go well, or you're not going to be able to hit the paces. Like, we have so many things in our head that prevent us from just doing the thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been such a great lesson for me. And don't get me wrong, I have worked towards other events and goals in my life in the running and biking space. But this feels different to me in a way that I don't know that I can articulate well.
What feels different?
The day-to-day, it doesn't feel like a grind. It doesn't feel like I'm being forced to wake up and, today rest, right?
Yeah. So you're saying right now in the current training journey that you're on, it doesn't feel like this heavy burden.
It doesn't.
Okay.
And I think it's because I've found at the time that it works in my life. I've not, I'm not worrying about getting together with friends for a group ride or a run, or including my spouse. Like my husband actually came to me at some point in the year that said, and I know you're really not getting much sleep right now because he's a night owl. I'm up at 5 on the trainer or in the gym.
Yep.
And he's like, I'd really like to start lifting. Would you consider maybe after the kids go to bed, you and I could lift at 9 p.m. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I love you. You're welcome to use the gym. But I got to do my thing. I got to get up at 5.
Yeah.
And I got to put in the work, because that's the time that I need to commit to myself.
Right.
And I can't worry if the kids wake up or if you're gone or whatever. I can't make this dependent on you.
Yeah.
As much as I want to. He's the one person that I would want to be in the gym with. But I got to do it on my own. And I think that mindset has to go into in the duathlon, this is the first 906 event that I will be taking on a big goal that I'm doing alone. I did the first mini by myself, but that feels luxurious. When you have a 10 a.m. start and you have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
When I compare the two tasks, and it felt big to me at the time.
Sure.
It felt big.
Well, it's all a progression, right?
It's a progression. Absolutely. Yep. I'm a very calculated risk taker. Mm-hmm. I remember when I first signed up for the mini Margie in 22. I think it was 22. Yes, 22. I had so many people being like, oh, I heard you're doing Margie. Are you doing the 100? And I remember looking at them being like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
No, I'm doing the mini and I'm really excited and happy with that. Mm-hmm. And it was just a matter of just putting in the work. I worked myself up to that. And I really just was this is just time for me to have on my bike with the event. It wasn't a question of am I going to finish? Am I going to need my lights? Am I going to, any of that stuff? That wasn't a question. I questioned a little bit of that more the next year when I did the Margie 50 bike. But again, my calculated risk taker brain knew that if I was taking on that task that I was going to invest in Margie Camp.
Right.
And that was a great experience for me. And I even had like my coach, Bob Zimmerman, he's like, why the heck are you here? He used some other words, but I won't say those. And he's like, you're local. You can come ride these anytime. And I was like, well, Christy McBride told me that Margie is like the best weekend on a bike. And
Margie Camp.
Yeah, Margie Camp is the best weekend on a bike.
Yeah.
And I believe her. So I'm like, that's why I'm here. I'm here because Christy told me that this is the best weekend. And it was. It's fabulous.
Yeah. Well, it's a community experience. It isn't just riding bikes and learning how to ride the trail, right?
Yep.
But like you're there with some very cool people.
Absolutely. So when I rode the Margie 50, I ended up riding with a friend of mine and we did it together. I mean, ultimately I knew I could get it done. I didn't ever really question about like finishing on time or like, before the cutoff.
Right.
And the duathlon's a different animal. It's going to be the furthest I've ever ran in my whole life. Furthest trail run, furthest run. Not furthest distance. I did the Crusher 100 last year. But it'll be, I've ridden similar distance for mountain biking, but it will be my longest run ever.
Unpack that a little bit more. So when you start talking about this, what you're training for, your day 207,
207.
And you said that it doesn't feel like a burden. You mentioned that the time's right, which makes sense just with where your current family evolution's at.
Yep.
The time's good for you to do this. And I think that's an important part or point for people to understand that, sometimes they're like choosing goals and trying to do things that aren't congruent with the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Which makes everything that much harder.
Yeah.
I learned 30 years ago in regional training for Cisco. And one of the things I'll never forget, like when they were talking about implementation of new ideas and new processes, the guy running regional, Rain Kansman, he's like, you know what? The thing you need to know, sometimes you can have a great idea or a great new process, and the only problem with it is the timing you're trying to implement it. And that has stuck with me for a long time in a lot of different ways in life. So your timing's good. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like in talking to you and different back and forth communication that we have about this, you also seem to have a very well-defined why.
Yeah.
That's meaningful.
Yeah.
That I think is super helpful because I think a lot of people go into goal setting for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I don't think you went into this for the wrong reasons.
I didn't. I appreciate you recognizing the timing piece because that reminds me of something that I think is important to share. When I finished the 50 bike in 23, a lot of folks that I had finished with or in the community were like, Margie, 100 next year. Like a lot of them were signing up. A lot of my like clients, a lot of my friends, a lot of my acquaintances were signing up for the 100 as this like expected progression. Mm-hmm. And I remember having no aspiration to take on the Margie 100. Full disclosure, I finished the 50 at like 5 a.m, 21 hours, something like that. We were riding for Dave, our friend Dave Carroll. We were riding in honor of him. We were doing it together. I got a little ahead of my riding partner, Val, at the end, and I made the conscious decision on Main Street there. There's a light pole. I waited for her. Mm-hmm. And when she rolled up, like every person that came, I saw headlights. I'm like, Val, is that you? And people would be like, nah. And I'm like, all right, I'm waiting for my friend Val. I couldn't cross that finish line without her. We had done this whole thing together and we never that was the first time either of us had waited for each other. I'm a really strong climber. She's a really just ballsy on the descents, which I'm a grandma. I'm like, no thanks. And, it didn't make sense for us to ride together, but we decided to, but we said, we're going to both not wait for each other. If I get ahead of you, no problem. If you get ahead of me, no problem. And it worked for us until the finish line. Yeah. And so I waited about, it was less than 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. But when she got there, she was like really touched that I had waited for her. And I was like, we started this together. We did this whole ride together. Like, I'm not going to like out sprint you at the finish line. We're going to finish together, finish what you start. Mm-hmm. We did it for Dave. Mm-hmm. And so I remember, you know, rolling off of that kind of that green dot, right? That accomplishment, rolling off of that and having a lot of people who were kind of chipping off that next step of the Margie 100. And I know for me, if I were to try to finish the 100 bike in the time frame, there's a lot of work I'd have to put into. And I have young kids, and it would really take out my ability to probably volunteer with 906, to ride with my kids. Mm-hmm. Like, it would really impact my life in a way that I don't want to do right now. I don't want to sacrifice that time with my kids or the time in our community for a goal that might be out of reach. And I don't know, I don't mean to sound like hard on myself, but I really have to be realistic with like the type of rider that I am and where I'm at in my progression. So the Margie Duathlon was the only 100-mile distance that I even considered. And I told my son, Arthur, who's my oldest, that if he ever decided he wanted to do the Margie, that I would do it with him. So he had decided he wanted to do the mini, you know, in 2024.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah, last year.
Yep.
And so I already knew when I finished the 50 bike in 23 that I was coming for the Margie Duathlon in 25. Mm-hmm. So it was very intentional. My kids are all in school now, so I actually have time, you know, when I have space in my day, like I can actually go to the trail. I can, you know, I don't work on Friday. I don't have regularly scheduled clients on Fridays, so I can go out to Ramba and run and bike out there. It was very intentional. It's not that it's not a whim, right? It's not a coincidence. It was an intentional planning of, this is when the timing works for my family and for what I need to put into it.
Yeah. So you know what you're doing and you know why.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's connected to everything else in your life. And it just, if it's that ingrained in, kind of going back to that whole conversation we were having about, you know, your personal life and your work life being intertwined. I mean, this is another level of it, like this, the training aspect, the wellness aspect of your life being intertwined into everything that you do and being put on an equal plane as being equally important.
Yeah. And I think why it doesn't feel like a burden, you know, aside from the timing being right and having the support, like I invested in a bike trainer. Like I spent the winter on a bike trainer, which I never really wanted to do. I've made some sacrifices, right, of spending more time in the basement than time outside, this winter training. Mm-hmm. I have a beautiful home gym, which I know not everybody is privy to, but you know, when my kids wake up, if I'm not in, I mean, it's very rare that I'm actually like still in bed. If I'm still in bed, they think I'm like, it's like a snow day or something, right? Like we don't have school. But they notify me in the gym, and they often do. There's no question of like, where's mom? She's either in the basement on the trainer or she's in her workout room. And my gym is 8 steps from the kitchen. So sometimes my lifts are like stupid long because I'm stopping kids from filling up water balloons outside, or I am helping a kid with breakfast, like in between sets. And so it's not always pretty. It's not that I can always just laser focus on the work that I'm doing. I'm oftentimes refereeing and thinking about other things. But I think the why also comes back to like, Tara was the first person that I told that Margie Duathlon was going to be my thing this year. And she died later that day. And I feel really strongly that like, I've got promises to keep. And it's not I feel like it's not even a voluntary thing anymore. Yeah. It's just a part of me. And it's a part of the last conversation that we had.
Right.
And I think a lot about like our conversation that day and what she saw in me. And I strive to see that in myself because I don't always, you know, I see myself as very like average, not in a bad way, but I'm always trying to think about like what that growth mindset sometimes has a little bit of like a hard edge to it.
Meaning what?
Meaning that like sometimes I don't see the progress or the success that I have, especially when I'm working towards a big goal.
Yeah, I could see that. I've known obviously that, because we've talked about it, that, you know, that conversation with Tara and the circumstances that followed have been a primary motivator for you in this. And I think in my mind, I think it's important to point out that you're aligning your goals and what you're trying to aspire to be external from yourself, meaning it's like you're doing it for somebody else, or you're doing it to attempt to be the person that she saw in you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's a lonelier place when your goals are always selfishly motivated.
Yeah.
You know, I think that it's a selfish place when everything you're doing is always about you. That's lonely.
Yeah.
You know, you can only tell so many friends about what you're doing for yourself before they get sick of hearing about it.
Right.
Right. And then you're just stuck with yourself, and that sucks. But there's a different dimension, and I'll struggle to even articulate it. But when you are legitimately, and this isn't like blowing smoke, this is real. When you're trying to be a better version of you for other people, it opens up a different door to a different world. And that there's a different type of motivation you draw from that.
Yeah.
You know, I know you're surrounded by your kids on a daily basis, your husband, you know, clients. Like, I think when you put yourself into an environment like that, you are by default held to a higher level of accountability, because you're raising humans.
Yeah.
Because you are advising other people how to eat, how to live. Well, fuck, if you don't demonstrate that you can do it, right?
Yeah.
Then what are we doing here? So it really, I mean, there's a higher level of accountability that gets placed on you when you put yourself in the positions like that. But a lot of what you do is helping other people.
Yeah.
That does pay back though, and it helps you.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say too that like the support, right? Like it comes back to like support crew, or just even doesn't matter what the patient's goal is or the client's goal. Like I'm there to support them.
Yeah.
And I try to do a really good job about like, I always say like I'm meeting my clients where they're at. Mm-hmm. And I think that it makes you a little bit more maybe unsure when you're walking into a situation or an appointment. Like I don't come in with an agenda. This isn't about me. It's about them. Mm-hmm. But if you think about like, if we bring it back to like, you know, the food industry or the wellness industry, like that's all about like selling a product, right? Like, yes, my business does charge money to, you know, for folks to work with me, but it's all about, you know, if I have someone who is able to get what they need in one session, mm-hmm. that's great. Mm-hmm. You know, most businesses would look at that as a horrible client retention model, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to help people.
Correct.
And I do find that like, it makes me so happy when people are then, the goal is for them not to work with me forever.
Yes.
The goal is for them to get what they need, the resources and the information that they need from me, and for them to be able to take it on their own.
Yes. That should always be the goal.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for 906. You could say we're selling a product. I think we're giving people an opportunity mm-hmm. through these events, and you can do what you want with it.
Yep.
But I know that for people who are willing to sign up and make the commitment and dedicate themselves to the journey that it can become, you know, coming into Polar Oil Crusher and Margie, like that can take years.
Yeah.
I know through that process, they're probably going to move on and do other things.
Yeah.
And they may or may not continue to do our events because they're going to take what they learned and they're going to go continue to evolve themselves. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That is literally what we're here for. And that is very counterintuitive, like you just said, because, you know, everything, you know, customer retention model. Well, first of all, I don't have customers.
Yeah.
Right? It's
for sure.
they're not a customer. It's like we're putting out this opportunity. We're making it available. Want it or don't want it. I don't care where you fall on it.
Yep.
But if you do show up to do it, here's the rules of engagement. And let's see what it does for your life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Let them decide. I think that if it's there to serve people and make them independent, there will never be a shortage of people who need that helping hand.
Yeah.
To get set in the right direction. As long as there's people on this planet,
Yeah.
that need's always going to be there. And the people that you work with and that you help succeed, who move on, if nothing else, they at least validate that what we're doing works.
Yep.
You know, that's enough.
Absolutely. And there is that accountability, right? Like I could say, I don't know, I could have the best nutrition plan or like great recipes or menus or whatever, but like if the person isn't willing to trust those recommendations and implement it into their life, that's the limiting factor of how it can affect there. So sometimes there's a breakdown there, right?
Absolutely.
And I find that the folks that I work with that are all in on, they're like, and sometimes it's hard. Like if I'm telling them to, I mean, the majority of the clients, I'm telling them like, you need to eat more. And usually that's the last thing they expect me to hear, or they expect to hear from me. And for them to trust me, and, you know, because there's a lot that comes up when they're like, well, if I eat more, then I'm going to gain weight. And if I gain weight, then I'm going to be slower. And if I, you know, they go down the rabbit hole of what ifs. But for those who just say like, all right, Dawn just learned everything about me and that she could in an hour, and I'm going to trust her recommendation that this is what I need to do to get to my goal.
Yeah.
And when folks follow through on that, that's where the magic happens. But I need the buy-in from them to. Yes.
Well, and again, they have to be willing to not overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
You really should constantly strive to make things as simple as possible.
Yep.
Because simple is achievable.
And it's sustainable.
Yes.
Right? Like so much about, if I think about other ways of talking about nutrition, it's very short-term gains or short-term success.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how long do you want your heart to be healthy for? Or how long do you want to be active for? And so why are you making choices or changes that you can only maintain for the short term when your actual goals are long term? Mm-hmm. And that's I always say we're playing the long game.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sustainability. That's an interesting word for sure. I agree with that.
Yeah.
100%. Here's a question for you that just popped in my head. I want to make sure I ask it before I forget. So you mentioned you have a home gym. I know that. I've seen pictures of it, seen pictures of you and the kids in it. So from a female perspective, what do you focus on for yourself in the gym? What's your core exercise? We're going to have a little meathead talk here. Easy.
I feel so happy to be included in the meathead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually genuinely want to hear this. I'm just curious. Is it different? How different? Is it the same? What do you focus on?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's any different from you because I only know my experience as a female.
Yep.
I work with a strength coach. I've been working with a strength coach since December of 21. Her name is Caro Tripp. She owns the Strength Collective here in town.
I have never heard of that.
She's amazing.
Okay.
I started working with her after I tore my hamstring and ran a marathon on it, which I do not recommend. And I had a hard conversation with my orthopedic doctor, Dr. Dixon, who said, hey, Dawn, so you keep having these like tendonitis issues that kind of turn out like real bad.
Yeah.
And he said, I really think you need to have strength training be like a pillar of your training as opposed to this like optional accessory that you engage with every once in a while.
So consistency.
Yes. And so again, like instead of trying to figure it out on my own, I just was like, all right, I'm going to enlist the help of an expert. And Caro works really well. Like she knows the female body and athlete, which is unique to her role as a strength coach.
Yep.
And so I follow, I started 2 days a week, and then we moved to 3 days a week. And so this has been since, coming up on 4 years in December, evolved into, I lift 4 days a week. So it's 2 days upper body, 2 days lower body. And it's, all focusing on like push, pull, press, hinge. I would imagine that a lot of the exercises are very similar to the ones that you do. And it focuses on like a progressive overload. So I'm doing like a 12-week cycle and then oftentimes choosing a different lift when that cycle, like comes back around.
Yeah.
So like on like my first lift of the day, which is lower body, or first lift of the week, right now I'm doing back squat. Like sometimes I do front squat, or sometimes it's like, I don't know, like I don't even know all of it, because I have my program on an app, and I just like follow through and just check the boxes. I just focus on doing the work.
Gotcha. So does the app have examples of the exercise?
Yeah. And just having like the experience of like been working with her for 4 years. Like it's nothing is like complicated.
Yeah.
Right. I still hate step ups. I do them every week. I hate them every single time. And my main goal when I started lifting and working with her was to be able to do an unassisted pull up. And I'm still working on it, but I'm at the skinniest band now.
Oh, okay. So you're using bands on the rack?
Yeah. But the interesting thing about that goes back to like me being 7. So we have to like bring it almost 33 years back. I had open heart surgery when I was 7 to repair a hole that I was born with that was causing some ruckus. And they went in through my back. So they broke all my ribs on my left side. And at my elementary school, there was a rope in gym that you had to climb, and you got a certificate when you got to the top of the rope.
I remember that.
Yeah, I never got the opportunity to climb that rope because I spent most of first grade when they realized I had a heart murmur that wasn't getting better and kind of, watching over me and my heart. And then I had surgery at the beginning of second grade, and I wasn't able to participate in gym class for the entire length of second grade. And so I never really got my upper body strength back to be able to do something like climbing a rope, And I had this like conscious decision in December of 2021 where I was like, I had surgery a long time ago. It was just this like talking about getting out of your own head. Like it was just this thing that I was always like having to be conscientious of. I will say, I just recognized that was the year I think it was 2021, or around the time that I actually had gotten cleared from the cardiologist and like no longer had to go back for regular appointments. And so I feel like that kind of helped lift that mental block of like, you have no upper body strength, like this happened to you kind of a thing. So yeah, that's been a big goal. It's getting there. It takes time, right? Like
oh yeah,
people do it so like make it look so easy, and you're just like, wow, okay, I'm not there yet, but I am. Same thing, like shoulder press. Instead of doing this training block, I'm doing like standing landmine press. So I'm always trying to like see how I can just a little different stressor, right? A little different muscle focus, but everything's pretty much the same. Like
landmine press with a barbell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So front squat, back squat,
bench press,
bench row, any type of row?
Yep. Yeah.
Like a barbell row?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pull-ups, push-ups, some core work.
Body weight.
Yep.
What's your favorite one? Like, what do you look forward to doing?
That's a good question.
Do you have a favorite?
I really do like deadlifts.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so deadlifts are in the program?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just like, I don't know. It feels good to feel really strong and be really strong. And my kids all know in our house, like, don't mess with mom. And when you're raising boys, I don't know. I feel like they need to know that I can throw things down if I need to, break up fights,
Deadlift seems to be a bit of a polarizing exercise that people have strong opinions on for or against. What's your opinion, or to a detractor, what would you say?
Yeah. I mean, they're hard. Deadlifts are hard.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like, I don't know, there's just nothing about it kind of like walking away from a good session, or just like, even if it's just maintaining the weight that you lifted the week before or backing off a little bit or setting a PR, right? It doesn't really matter the amount that you're deadlifting.
Yeah.
I just really like the way that I feel when I'm deadlifting. I like the way that it feels in my body.
Yeah. So my take on the deadlift is, I mentioned this when Sean was here too. First of all, typically the person that I hear is speaking against the deadlift, those are the people that aren't doing the deadlift.
Yeah.
Okay. That's step one. But then beyond that, I think that deadlifts suck. They just, there's no other way around it.
Yeah.
They're terrible. I would even put the squat in that category too.
Yeah.
Squats are also terrible.
Yep.
They suck because as you ramp your weight up, as you get stronger, the weights get heavier. And then, you know, when you start getting into that 225, 300 pound range and your body is either lifting that or supporting that, it takes a lot of focus.
Yep.
And, you know, it's fucking hard. There's no other way around it. But then I'm going to say this for guys, because clearly I'm not a woman.
Yeah.
But I am a guy. And I think that for some guys, the struggle is the deadlift is not like focused on a show muscle group.
Right.
Okay. You can't do a great set of deadlifts and then go pose in the mirror. There's no tangible result.
Right.
In fact, you might actually be getting a bigger ass from it. Right. Yeah. So it's not sexy.
Yeah.
There's nothing sexy about it. Doing a deadlift, not sexy.
Yeah.
The look of a deadlift, not sexy.
Right.
Going in the mirror, not sexy.
Yeah.
So there's just not that payoff, especially for the younger guys that I see. The younger guys, they will not hesitate to work on biceps every single workout.
Yeah.
Every workout. I just had this conversation with Cable the other day when we were in the gym. It was all three of us, me, Cable, Gavin. And of course he went in and he started on bicep exercises. And then he came over and he's talking about biceps this and biceps that, and he's flexing for me. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, just do a different exercise. He's like, Dad, I got to do the biceps. I'm like, Cable, how often do you see me train biceps? And he's like, never. And I said, okay, you're right. I said, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
I said, are my arms tiny? And he's like, no. Go do something else.
Yeah.
But, you know, they gravitate toward it because they can go flex in the mirror.
For sure.
So you're doing the deadlifts. You got the squats. You love the deadlifts. I'm with you on that. What are you doing for core?
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Like,
are planks in there or not?
planks are in there. Front plank, side plank. There's some like V-ups. There's some like hanging on the bar, like knees, like.
Raised?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you do just like some bar hangs just to see how long you can like hang on?
Yep. Also do, when I'm working shoulders, do some like, where you're doing like shoulder shrugs, like as you're hanging off the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a good mix in there. A lot of the times, you know, like march with like a barbell or a plate like over your head and you're doing a lot of the core work. I feel like is a little bit either really basic or it feels kind of tricky where you're like, oh, this isn't really, you're like sneakily working your core, which is great when you're thinking about hike biking.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Or even trail running, right?
Yeah.
Like you need a lot of that really. It's not the like, I rarely do like a standard crunch, right?
God, I can't remember the last time I did a crunch.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if I'm doing something like that, like I would say the closest thing that I do to a crunch is kind of like a toe touch, but like with a weight, right? So your legs are extended towards the ceiling and you have a dumbbell in your hand and you're bringing, you know, you're bringing that weight up to your toes, right? That's probably the closest thing. But yeah, it's not those like, I don't know, my goal has never been to like aspire to like have abs. And it's so funny because my strength coach, who's a friend of mine, I post a picture every day in my Insta stories on like what day of training I'm at. I don't really think too much about it. It's just kind of become a habit of mine. And over Leadership Summit, I actually had 2 people come up to me and were like, you have no idea how inspiring you are. And again, like I said, I feel very average. Like I'm just putting in the work. I'm just a girl with a goal, you know? And that can be a blessing and a curse sometimes to have that like mindset, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I don't feel like I'm doing anything like revolutionary.
No, but I mean, maybe what you're doing is you're sharing what you're doing.
Yep.
You know, you're sharing your journey or the progression.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because there is a segment of people out there that will naysay anybody who does that.
Yeah.
There's people, and my take on it is the people who rub up against you. If you're doing cool stuff and you're sharing it with people, I genuinely think you're sharing it to show others what is possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To try to like, hey, if it resonates with somebody, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they have some questions, I'm going to help them.
Yeah.
Right. That's like the whole premise to 906. But there is a group of people out there, they just hate seeing somebody share shit like that.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's because they ain't doing shit.
Yeah.
They like to put off like they are. And there is accountability. Coming back to this accountability piece I touched on earlier, like if you're putting the spotlight on yourself and you have to hit the same bar that you are trying to help other people hit.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
No.
Right? If we all just kind of sat back in the shadows, it's a hell of a lot easier just to kind of kick back and, lower the bar.
Right.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Right? Just have like this mystique of being a badass, but not really doing much.
Yeah.
Or something you did years ago and then you're just riding that thing.
Yeah.
Right? Into the sunset. So I give you a lot of credit for doing that because it inspires people and it pisses people off at the same time.
It's funny that you mentioned about people kind of rubbing up against you the wrong way. I actually got written up in my first job for talking about running too much. And ironically enough, worked in the ICU and people, I would run before work. People would see me running or they'd talk to me about like, oh, what race, or maybe they started running, right? And they want to ask me questions or whatever. And like, it's not that we were neglecting patients or responsibilities to chat about running, but you get to know folks that you work with, right?
Well, you would hope.
And especially when you work in a high stress environment like the ICU.
Yeah.
And so I remember getting called into an office and being told like, we've had complaints about the fact that you're talking too much about running. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so what is the problem? And I don't remember the details of like what the actual problem was. They just wanted me to know that there was someone who didn't like it.
Yep.
And so I was a lot butthurt about it. Like you hate to hear that like someone doesn't like something that you're doing. I was in my early 20s, so I didn't know that, there's going to be a lot of people in your life that maybe don't agree with what you're doing or don't like it. And then it was ironic enough because I ran the Boston Marathon like 2 months later. And that the same group of, my bosses who had sat me down and said, you need to stop talking about running at work. They took a picture of me from my personal Facebook page and they put it in the hospital-wide email newsletter, congratulating me on my Boston Marathon finish.
Mm-hmm. Well, because now it makes them look good.
Exactly. And that was the moment that I was like, yeah, this isn't so much about me and so much more about you.
Right.
And
Interesting.
Yeah. It was really interesting.
Yeah. There's that same group people actually, I think a lot of times like they are quick to celebrate you if they feel what you're doing is making them look good.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start to differentiate and people, see you a little bit as doing something good, then they're not as supportive.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And anyone who knows me well knows that I'm doing this for me.
Yeah.
I'm doing it alone. That's intentional.
Yep.
But I couldn't do this without the support of without you all putting on the race, without the support crew, without my family. It's not it's an individual, the work on the day of the event is individual, but you're never truly alone. Mm-mm. And through sharing, especially heading up on a year of losing Tara, I had a real hard time. That year was really tricky to navigate with losing a friend.
Sure.
And Tara was the second friend I had lost tragically or suddenly, I would say. The first being Dave Caro, which was 11 months before Tara. Mm-hmm. And both of them were really tied into my start of mountain biking. Dave was really a great encourager of me, especially in moments where I felt timid and going to the West End Rampa rides. And, he talked to me in such a patient way. The thing I hate as an adult is feeling like I'm making anybody like wait for them.
Well, everybody hates that.
I know.
It's not unique to you.
But I also hate being bum rushed on the trail. So
Yeah.
that means like if I've got people that are like right on my wheel, like I'm one that will pull off and let people go because I really just need to like think about what I need and I need to navigate the trail on my own.
Yeah.
I've actually early on in my like mountain biking days, I actually had to tell some friends we were all riding together because they were like coaching me on the trail and I'm like, I need you to stop talking to me. I need to do this on my own. I'm like, you're yelling so much at me that I can't have thoughts in my head.
You just made me think of, this is from Bike Club years ago. I remember a coach. I just happened to be with the group. I was behind a coach who was then behind all the kids, just constantly critiquing this kid that was in front of her. And I finally had to take her off to the side and I'm like, you got to stop talking.
Yeah.
You just need to let him do. He'll figure it out. And if he has a question, he'll probably ask.
Yeah. I also was like, you guys are making me feel like a crappy biker, right? When you come into a group and you're like the last one to come all the time, or like when everyone's yelling at you, like I know everyone wanted me to improve, right? They're seeing it as a helpful thing.
Yeah, they intend well.
But it like, when you're already feeling all in your like nerves about like this sketchy downhill or, you know, like just new terrain or anything like that. Again, being a very calculated risk taker goes 110% against what it's like to be on a trail mountain biking, right? Like that gets me totally out of my comfort zone, which is actually, I think, the thing that got me hooked. Because having had a long history of running and marathon running when you're on roads, and I mean, aside from like a rogue water cup or a pothole, you're really not, you can kind of just like get in the zone.
Sure.
You can think about life things. You can like sing songs in your head. You can do really whatever you want. But the beauty of being on the trail is that if you start thinking about something else, you're going to end up off course or off trail. And that opportunity to really be forced to stay present and be present has been something that has just really benefited me in the years that I've been, you know, mountain biking.
Yeah. With Bike Club, when the kids are on single track, they're forced to be very focused, very zeroed in, or even when the kids are running, right? With the running program. So when you're in a trail system, there are a lot more hazards. The trail's narrow, it's undulating, it's inconsistent. Like you're always looking for the next thing ahead. There's stuff in the way. That is actually more safe than when we have groups go out on the bike path.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, and I think this could be tied back just to like life approach, but when we take the kids out on the bike path, it is immediately viewed as less dangerous. There aren't as many dangerous inputs that are forcing them to be dialed in and aware. Yeah. And they're more likely to dick around. And then they're also more likely to have incidents. Yeah. Whether it's within the group, you know, a negative sort of crash and scrape of the knee, or a negative interaction with the public because they're riding on the bike path like knuckleheads. Right. If you take that back to life, though, this would be, I guess, you know, an analogy for continuously kind of keeping yourself in a challenging environment and not going onto the bike path of life, you know, where it's just easy, slow rolling, you know, safe, not too challenging, not too hard. That's the bike path of life is a path to nowhere. Yeah. And it's also a path of missed opportunities. 100%, because there are no opportunities. Right. It's a bike path. Right. Well, I mean, the only bike path there is you bump into somebody and piss them off. I mean, you don't have to go on the bike path for that. You could just jump on Facebook. Right. From the bike path. Yeah, from while you're on the bike path. Exactly. Oh, my God. So you're feeling good for the duathlon? I am. I haven't given myself any other reason to not feel good. How many days until the duathlon? Do you know? I actually don't know that number. Okay. I looked at that recently. I know it's less days than the days I've put in. Yeah. So I've been just counting and focusing on like today's 207. Yep. And looking forward to getting my bike off the bike trainer, getting up back on the dirt.
And looks like Rob's got some more running days.
What trainer are you using?
The one that Spencer picked out for me at West End.
Do we know what brand it is?
No.
No. We'll have to ask Spencer.
Yeah.
Is it are you using any digital app with it? Is there is it on this television screen?
I use my laptop, so it's like I use Zwift, so it's a smart trainer.
Okay, so it is a smart trainer. You are using Zwift.
Yep. Rob Lee does all my workouts, and
Yes.
so I just literally look at Training Peaks.
Yep.
Look at what Rob wants me to do and do that.
Are you using a head unit? Like Garmin or anything?
Yeah.
Is it on your bike during your workout on the trainer?
No.
No. Okay. I always use mine actually.
Yeah. I don't. I used it one time when I was having some connectivity issues getting my workout on my laptop. When I was connecting to the computer, there was just like some weird kind of technology thing where I couldn't get my workout. So I used like a Garmin head unit for my bike 1 or 2 times just to see like what are the cues for, like RPMs and heart rate and things like that.
Are you using power?
Mm-hmm. On the bike.
On the bike.
Heart rate on the road.
Okay. So outside heart rate.
Heart rate.
Inside power, probably from the smart trainer.
Correct.
Okay. No power on the bike. No power pedals.
Nope.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. And we'll see what happens. Like on the road is a little tricky with like heart rate. Because like going back to Dave, he passed away in a cycling accident.
Yep.
I actually sold my gravel bike after that happened because I like had no interest in riding or being on the road.
Yeah.
I do notice Rob was giving me some feedback. This was a week or 2 ago about wanting to keep my heart rate a little more like in a tighter range for my run.
Yeah.
And there's times where like my heart rate just like jacks up and I feel like I'm like not even moving. So I was trying to keep a little bit more of a watchful eye of it. Not only just like, if my heart rate gets high, instead of slowing down, like I'll actually just like walk and get my heart rate back into the range.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I might try to I'm just going to like nickel and dime my pace.
Yep.
So I'm trying to make big moves so that it moves more quickly back into the zone I'm supposed to be in. But I have noticed that like when a car passes me on the road, my heart rate jumps up. And it's something, early on for Margie, the mini Margie, and for Margie 50 and then the mini Margie last year in Crusher, I was working with Al and Kristen Wade from Mudslingers.
Yep.
Didn't use heart rate a lot, didn't use, power or anything like that. But they did have some gravel rides for me. And there's lots of great gravel roads. I mean, I always would see you riding by my house.
Yep. Lots of places to ride out there.
And I would notice that before I'd have to ride on the road, I was having a lot of anxiety of like not wanting to do it. Like, and not because I didn't think I was capable, but just like these what ifs, right? Yeah. Of like the whole idea that like the world isn't safe, right? So the one thing that I kind of had to resort to doing is like, okay, I always ride with a backlight, with a red blinky light, even in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
My husband can track me like via Garmin and my iPhone. I always have my phone with me. He always knows where I'm going and, when I should expect to return. Having a flexible schedule, I always try to bike at like not during like end of day or like early in the morning.
Non-peak time.
Non-peak times when I can.
Yeah.
And then I literally just had to tell myself, you're fine. I had to just get on the bike. And sometimes I have to say out loud, you're fine. And it's just a little bit of like forcing the issue because I would have never ridden on the road again.
Yeah. What's the name of that Garmin radar? Is it Via?
Is it View?
I've never used the product.
What's that?
Is it View?
I don't know. Garmin has a product you can put on your bike and it tells you on your head unit when there's a car coming.
Yep. Yeah.
That would be an option. So you're going to be riding on the road.
Yep. So it's gotten better.
Yeah.
Right? So, but I noticed that when I was like carrying over to running, because when you're running, you're running towards traffic, right? And there's not a lot of shoulder like running country roads right now, but like you do move over. And the other thing that gets my heart rate up is dogs. I've been chased.
Yeah.
And so just being mindful of like, okay, again, being mindful of that number, that data, right? So Rob's seeing this like higher heart rate than what I should have.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that like, hey, but like my effort isn't matching that high heart rate. It's actually something external. Like there's a car passing me.
Correct.
Or there's a dog that's barking at me and I don't know if he's coming for me or not.
Yeah.
Again, it's still great feedback. I'm still doing what I can to like listen, right? To follow the effort that the kind of the workout that he's prescribing for me. But also to put it into context that like my pace and effort on the road or the trail. And I see this in mountain biking too, where if I get to like a sketchy feature, it's like I could be standing there looking at it, nervous, and my heart rate's going to be high.
Yeah. That's the downside to heart rate.
Yeah.
It's the variability.
Yep.
That stuff. Are you sick?
Right.
Are you getting better from being sick? Are you dehydrated?
Yeah.
All that stuff. Have you looked at all at the Garmin, the power pedals?
You told me about them. I did look at them.
Yeah, they are sweet.
Yeah.
The best part of the power pedals is you can move them across any bike.
That's their like main marketing thing right now.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me because that is the huge upside to it.
Yeah.
You know, when I had a power meter on my gravel bike 5 years ago, it was awesome, but it was attached to that bike.
Yep.
It wouldn't move across other bikes.
Yeah.
But the pedals can move. And they can also go on your bike that's on the trainer, and then you don't need to use the power meter that's on the smart trainer. You can use it from the pedals, and they tend to be more accurate.
Okay.
The training, I know that Rob's big on power.
Yeah.
From having trained with him, huge on it, because he's saying that from a training stress perspective, that's like the standard number. Heart rate variability. It's always like, well, was it really that hard of a workout?
Yeah.
That's probably what he's seeing.
Right.
In the data. He'll figure it out. He'll get you.
I find I'm less, like my effort running is less than what I'm used to running at. And that's just being more mindful of like heart rate and zones and things like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like I could go forever. Like that's usually my feedback for him is like, yeah, I feel like I could run like this forever.
I think it's really cool to train with somebody like Rob. And again, not that you have to do it forever.
Yeah.
But to train and to learn how your body feels in the different zones. That is very educational.
Well, I don't know if I texted you this or not, but last week I've been living in this like zone 1, zone 2 land for a long time running.
With Rob?
With Rob.
This does not surprise me.
Which has felt like, it feels like I'm like, okay, I'm going to run 40 miles and this is not feeling like it wasn't matching up in my brain for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So I had intervals last week and I got back and I was being mindful. Like I can see like my pace on my watch when I'm like being mindful of like heart rate. And I'd seen some like I saw some like 730s pace in there, which like I've ran really fast and I just haven't seen paces like that in a long time.
Yep.
And I got back to my car. I remember like pulling up my workout thing because I was trying to look at like, okay, how closely was my heart rate to what he wanted it to be? Because I've been trying to be a good student of the training, right?
Be on target.
Yeah, be on target. And I saw that my max pace was like 6:37. And I was like, well, I guess this zone 1, zone 2 BS is actually doing something, right? And I mean, I was definitely in those hard efforts. I was working hard, right?
Yeah.
But there was like one set that I like didn't get to like, I didn't get up to that zone 4 that he wanted me, but I'm running like a 6:37 pace, which is fast for me.
Yeah.
And maybe fast for a lot of people, right? Especially those non-runners.
He has I'm going to say it's a very scientific approach.
Yeah.
Very data driven. And, every workout, as you know, is very structured.
Yep.
You're going to do this for a warm up. You're going to go into this, zone 2 for X number of minutes. You're going to do this interval. Then you're going to do this recovery, this interval. Like it's all spelled out.
Yep.
And like, he knows if you just follow the plan,
Yep.
And if you hit the numbers, it's going to lead to this.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just, it is what it is.
In the running world, it's very common in a lead up to say like a marathon or an ultra marathon to do some like dress rehearsal races. So maybe like a half marathon or like a marathon distance trail run in a lead up to an ultra marathon. And so I had a couple of like, I threw Rob out a couple of dates of like races that are local here, like 50Ks. And it was really interesting having that conversation with him of like, he shared that in his experience, those like dress rehearsal races don't necessarily improve what happens on the day of the event.
Right.
And so he's kind of recently he asked me about one. It's during Margie Camp weekend. He's like, how tied are you to this 50K that's happening? And I'm like, I'm tied to Margie. That's all I'm, so, I talk to my athletes a lot about like, A races, right? Like Margie's my A race this year. Margie's my only race this year. I'm putting all of my eggs in the Margie Duathlon basket and I'm owning it, right? So whatever happens, when I am on course that day, there's no question that I didn't do what I needed to do
Right.
in order to get that green dot,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But sometimes we we get distracted by these like other races or events and it's easy, right? Like, one of my friends just called me yesterday and was like, oh, I talked to Elizabeth at the open house about doing a Crusher 40 EX and I'm going to get you and Arthur to come with us. And all I'm thinking about is like, well, as long as Rob okays it.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think there was a conversation that came up about, group rides and how that fit into Rob Lee's training plan. This was early,
not well.
Yes. And I think that, I don't know if it was you or Rob that had mentioned like, you're going to learn that you can't do it all.
Yeah. It's 100% true.
You can't do it all. And so
you really can't ride with other people very much.
Right.
If you're going to follow the plan.
Yep.
And stick to it.
Yep.
And stick to the goal and the focus.
And I did tell Rob one day, I ran with Stacey Bull and I told Rob, I said, it was right after he gave me that heart rate, like kind of like a little direction. Mm-hmm. And I said, so don't look at my data today because today is going to be a social run.
Because you're with somebody.
I'm with somebody and I'm not going to do it. I'd love to do it more. But when you're running and riding an individual race, the work that needs to be done is very individual.
It is.
And I don't feel alone in that factor. Like sometimes I do, right? Like, and my friends always, tell me like, oh, I would ride with you or run with you anytime. And it's like, I love you for that. But I also just have to I have to put in the work.
Yeah.
I have to do what's asked of me. But I also know that and I feel like if Rob were here, he would say it's rare that I miss a workout. That's not a flex. I had COVID after Christmas and I took I took the time off that I needed and got cleared by my doctor to come back. Because like I mentioned with my heart thing, my heart doesn't bother me anymore. But if I get sick with a virus like COVID, it does some wonky stuff that can be concerning. And so I'm mindful of that. I keep that in my peripheral.
Sure.
But I rarely miss a workout. I don't feel like the work that I'm putting in majorly interrupts my work or my family life. And I know that that's necessary. That's necessary in order for it not to feel like a burden.
Yeah, I don't think that saying that you rarely miss a workout is a flex. That is a byproduct of what it takes to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
I think that to me, you got to keep it as black and white as you can.
Yep.
If you have a plan and you have a goal, you can't miss workouts.
Yep.
End of story. Because if you start to make exceptions, once you make one exception, you're like, well, kind of tired today. Work was hard. Once you have one exception, you've just opened up the door and then it just keeps sliding.
Yeah.
And now it's not an exception anymore. Now you're just a person that only does 75% of their workouts.
Right.
And that happened over time. Right. So I think that's awesome. I think people need to hear that. If you're going to be all fucking in.
Yeah.
And do it or don't.
One morning I was getting ready. I was just refilling my water bottle and heading into the gym. And my son Titus looked at me and said, "Are you okay, Mom?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay." I was like, yeah, I just don't really feel like lifting today. He's like, well, you don't have to. And I said, yes, I do. And I got my butt in the gym. And I think it's great for them to hear that you don't always have to feel like putting in the work.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rarely miss a workout if I did it based on feeling.
Yeah.
It's based on.
No, you'd miss a lot of workouts.
Yeah. And I've kind of just gotten to the point, like our youngest, he sleeps really well. Like he's not, a baby anymore. He's 5.
Yeah.
But it's often that he wiggles his way into our bed at some point during the night. And there's this like bittersweet memory or bittersweet kind of situation of like knowing he's not going to do it forever, but also feeling like I need to sleep. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really factor in tiredness either. It's just kind of like, sometimes I'm like, I wish I had aero bars on my bike so I could just like rest my head or like close my eyes.
Here's a news flash. If you're an adult and you have a busy life and you have goals, you're going to be tired.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yeah.
If you want to be well rested, don't have goals, remove your commitments and lay around.
Yeah.
But you're still going to be tired.
Yeah.
And unhealthy.
Absolutely. And so, just not having just being realistic with yourself, right? Like, okay, you're working hard towards something and not giving myself the out, because if I gave myself the out when I was tired one time, you're absolutely right. Like it's a slippery slope. You're going to keep. And I also think about like when I am running during the duathlon, I am going to be tired.
Absolutely.
And so I try to just put myself, I kind of naturally I don't like meditate or do anything like that, but I use a lot of visualization. Mm-hmm. And I find that when things get hard or when I'm not feeling like 100%, mm-hmm. which let's newsflash, no one ever feels 100%. Mm-hmm. That I always think about like, imagine feeling this on the trail. Like, what will it look like? What will it feel like? One thing that I've been doing recently that I'm really proud of is running in the dark. I don't like the dark. That's probably one of the biggest things, aside from like missing the cutoff, knowing that I'm going to be alone in the dark is like a big thing for me. So what I've been doing is like tomorrow and Friday, I have like a run on deck.
Yep.
And so there's no excuse. Like I'm going to be running at 5 a.m. and I'm putting in the work first on the road, but eventually then on the trail to be out there in the dark by myself. And that like makes my belly hurt a little bit, like to be honest. Right. But I know that it's actually like the first time I went out recently, aside from like ski season, right? Like I'd skied with my husband at dark and things like that, but it was actually a lot less scarier than I thought it was going to be.
No, it's very freeing. Night riding or night running is my favorite.
Yeah.
That's the best time to be out there.
Yeah.
It's very lonely.
It is.
In the training world, so training is done and there's this idea of peaking, mm-hmm. right? And, so you'll build up over X number of months, right, to your goal race.
Yeah.
And in theory, you're going to peak for that event.
Right.
You aren't at peak performance for all 10 months.
Right.
Right? Because any good trainer, any good coach is going to tell you it's not sustainable. Well, life is the same way. I think that people have an unrealistic expectation of themselves in day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. You are not going to be 100% of your max potential every day. We are going to have these peaks and valleys every day, every week, every month, every year. And it's rare that you're going to be at your actual optimal 100%.
Yeah.
You might spend a lot of days at 90, 80, or 70, or hell, 60.
Right.
And on those days, the goal is you have to be the best 60% version of yourself that you can be.
Yep.
Right? That to me is like the paradigm shift people need to have. And then all of a sudden, if you can kind of lock into that, and it's like, yeah, that's right. You know what? It's been a rough week. I got a bunch of shit going on in life that has got me down. And I'm going to go to the gym.
Yep.
It just makes it easier.
Yeah.
But if you constantly have this idea that you're supposed to go in and be able to just like attack every session optimally, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
That's a fairy tale.
I remember working through that after Tara died. And I know that you shared, that kind of as you were keeping the train going, keeping the train on the tracks after losing Tara, I remember getting up and, oh my gosh, like not even recognizing myself in the mirror because my eyes were like high school boyfriend breakup swollen. Like I would just cry at the drop of the hat and okay, like, and rightfully so. Like we had a big loss. And on top of that, there was a lot of gratitude behind it because the day that I met with Tara and told her I was going to tackle the Margie Duathlon this year, I wasn't supposed to be here. We weren't supposed to have a meeting. She had emailed me. I happened to be in town working with Northern's football team. I happened to check my email and see that she, wanted to meet with me either that day or next week. And I remember, meeting with her, and it was very uncharacteristic of me. Like I had a presentation at noon that I hadn't even started the slide deck for. And I'm so proud of my former self for being present with her and taking the time because I got 3 extra hours with Tara. Because spoiler alert, there was no next week. And I am a perpetual box checker. And that's one thing that I really remind myself of every day of, yes, I can have this to-do list and yes, I can have goals, but am I showing up for the people today that actually need me? And that's a lesson that I will carry with for the rest of my life. Because there was no next week. And there were moments where I felt a little bit, I think we all felt cheated. Like we all wanted more time with her.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, that's something that I think a lot about is just that, am I showing up? Am I prioritizing what needs to be prioritized today? And I will forever, ever be grateful for that lesson because I think there's folks that never learn that in their whole life.
Show up and be grateful. Where are we at on time?
2:25.
Oh, what time is it?
11.
That's pretty good. Dang, that got away from us.
I know. Well, I teased you about clearing my whole day.
Well, I knew that was not a joke.
Yeah, I know it wasn't either.
Have we covered everything you wanted to cover today? Are we leaving anything out?
Not that, I mean, I tried to show up today just like I do when I meet with my clients is like, obviously I actually almost texted you last night to say like, do you have like prepared questions that you ask folks?
Do we?
I've never seen a script or heard a script.
Yeah.
Or
it didn't seem like it. I actually
conceptualized the script.
I actually asked my husband, Jordan, because he's been listening to the podcast. I wonder if he'll jump through to listen to mine before he's working his way through. But he's like, I don't think he has listed questions, because that's kind of the traditional thing. Like when I've been on podcasts in the past, right? Like they do a bunch of research on you, or they maybe give you questions in advance. Right. And I mean, I feel like I'm an open book and you could ask me about anything except for to name clients that I work with, because that would violate HIPAA, right? You could ask me about anything. And I feel like everybody just wants that human connection. Like James said that, all these teens are lonely, preteens and teens are lonely. And I would venture to say that we have a lot of lonely adults. And my desire in sharing is that hopefully that someone hears something that resonates with them and they feel less alone.
That was, I was going to say disturbing. It was disturbing, but I don't know what the word is. But when he talked about the rate of loneliness increasing with kids, or the rate at which kids are reporting being lonely, that's just fucking sad.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that just more people got to get upset about it. I don't think people get upset enough about this stuff. Like they don't get upset if they look at data, if they see data. It's like they just gloss over it.
Yeah.
More
Right.
people need to get worked out.
Right?
No. Well, right. it's like it's not their fault, somebody else's fault.
Right.
But it isn't really about fault.
No.
It should be about what are you doing to help fix it?
Yes.
All of this stuff should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the podcast. So, yeah, I approach the podcast the same way I approach my life.
Yeah.
Show up and see where it goes. That's literally the way I look at it.
Well, I learned that about you through like helping out with the events and through partnering with the events with my practice that I just block off like around events. I just block off my day because I know that you're not going to text me 6 months in advance and say, "Hey Dawn, will you do this thing on this day?" But if I show up here, I mean, that's how I end up like pre-writing the course or like going and grabbing like electrolytes from somewhere. Like there's always a need that has to happen.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's just a matter of like, well, one, showing up and making yourself available. And obviously there's things that do have to happen at a certain time. But I think just going with that expectation of like, I'm usually like, okay, well, Todd's going to need me for something. And like, there's nothing, I love feeding people. There's nothing.
And you've done a good job of it.
There's nothing better than, spending the whole day at Levasseur or at an aid station and just, like really just supporting folks. And at Lake Levasseur this year, I felt like a professional, like water bottle filler. And I wasn't really thinking of it because that's just like what I do. But one of the other, support crew members that was there was just like, oh my gosh, they were like, everyone loved seeing you and you were so great to all of them. And to me, I'm not sitting there, I'm not filling people's water bottles thinking like, I want this person to think that I'm so great. It's just like, I want their event. I want them to get their green dot. And that's why like, obviously for the events, like fueling green dots means, like a success.
Yeah,
like
finishing.
A finishing, right?
Yeah.
But that green dot could be different for everybody. It could be recovering from an eating disorder. It could be getting out of your own way and actually putting time into an event.
Well, it could just be showing up.
Right. But I know I shared with you, I had this sense of like, I was watching, there's a documentary about the first female to finish the Barkley Marathon. And the race director was talking about how it was mathematically impossible based on the extrapolation of her other attempts or even her pace during the race itself, that it was impossible for her mathematically to finish before the cutoff. And I had this feeling of like, if I think about the duathlon, we have this like technical mountain biking section and we have this run that's trail and technical, and the furthest I'll get to run 40 miles a couple of weeks before I turn 40, which I'm pretty excited about. And I had this feeling of like, and I think I don't know if I texted you or if I told you that I was like, I need you to know that if I miss the cutoff at Jackson Mine Park, like I'm going to work my butt off to not have that happen. But I'm not stopping.
Yeah.
Right?
You told me that.
For me, my green dot, yes, cherry on top would be that green dot on the board. But no matter what time I finish, there will be one person missing from the finish line. And that's Tara. I told her I was going to do it. And that's what I'm set out to goal. So I told you, I told my husband, and I told my friend Steve, who is coming out to crew for me. And none of them look surprised, including you. And I was like, I just need you to know this. And so sometimes it's not abiding by like the rules, right? Like if that happens, I'm not going to expect anything from anybody except for, my crew. And I hope that doesn't happen. But I think sometimes when we're working towards a big goal, we don't plan, we don't set ourselves up for success in the event that everything goes wrong or not according to plan.
I think too many people become too specific with what success looks like.
Yeah.
And then because they've got all of these qualifiers of success along the way built into their plan, that's why they end up quitting and giving up.
Yeah.
Because it's just overly defined. I think, in the same way that if we leave the podcast undefined, then it's limitless. It can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Versus if I had this overly structured, list of questions and, hey, wait, we can't talk about that because we got to get through this,
Yep.
I don't know. Like, I think what we've been able to do is balance structure and lack of structure.
Mm-hmm.
We've been able to balance honoring the fastest racers and saying the slowest matter too.
Yep.
We've been able to come in and say racers matter, so do sport crews.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of blown up the hierarchy that normally gets built around like, oh, it's the ultimate racers that are the best and, lowly volunteers down here. And we're just all on a level playing field. Yep. And it's all about our experience together. And whatever your experience is, it's what you need in that moment.
Yeah.
And you can have it.
Yep. It's yours. It's an opportunity.
Yes. And whatever yours is has no impact on mine. Mm-hmm. It doesn't devalue or value mine. We're just sharing the same space, having an experience from an opportunity that was provided. So I think we're going to wrap up there. That's a good place to wrap up. I will, I'm going to see you before September, but I plan on seeing you at the finish line by 8:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Sunday morning.
I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen.
Yeah. And if you get there at noon, well, then I guess I'll come see you then too.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. We're out of here.
All right. Thanks.
Later.